The signs were prepared and positioned near the front entrance, having spent the majority of the last couple of days perfecting them. Now came the challenging part. Ascending the stairs into the master bedroom, I swiftly stripped the bed, maneuvered the mattress off the queen-sized frame, and half lifted, half slid it downstairs, through the hallway, out the front door, and onto the lawn adjacent to the street. Returning inside, I hurled the slats and bedclothes downstairs, following them outside and adding them to the pile beside the mattress. After another trip upstairs, I dismantled the side rails and swiftly transported them outside. Glancing at my watch, I noted it was 4:22. Time was of the essence. I needed to finish by 5. Reassembling the bed took until 4:35. Next up was the kitchen table, light enough for me to handle alone. I angled it sideways through the door and placed it beside the bed in the yard. The last item was the 6x8 throw rug in the living room. After rolling it up, I joined it with the other items in the yard, erected the signs, and proudly observed the time. 4:55. Just 10 minutes until my wife's return. Stepping into the middle of the street, I surveyed my handiwork. It was a sight to behold, almost bringing a tear to my eye. Our marriage bed, the kitchen table, and throw rug, 3 places I knew had been used by my wife and her lover repeatedly over the past 6 months. The signs, perfectly placed and out of reach, completed the scene. I approached each piece of furniture and read aloud the large sign in front of it. "These items are yours for the taking, free. They are no longer wanted in this house. If you are able to stomach the stench of infidelity and broken vows, help yourself." The sign above the bed detailed my wife's infidelity, specifying her regular liaisons with her lover over the past 6 months. Above the kitchen table, another sign recounted their activities, typically just before she served me dinner. On the throw rug, a sign indicated their preference for that spot. Each sign was adorned with a 17 by 24-inch photo of the adulterous couple in the act. Behind the table, a 5th sign revealed the identity of my wife's lover, Greg Allen, her boss at Mitchell Price, and Allen Realty. Married with 3 children, he was unaware of his wife's actions, but not for long. The time was 4:57, just in time. She would be home any minute. As I turned to assess the gathering crowd of neighbors and the increasing number of halted cars, some onlookers phoned friends or the police. I nonchalantly acknowledged the gathering and retreated into the house, closing the door behind me. Precisely at 5 p.m., my wife's car rounded the corner. Observing the commotion near our house, she slowed down, her gaze fixed on the spectacle unfolding on our lawn. I imagined her focusing on the furniture and signs, particularly the large photos of her and Greg Allen engaged in their illicit activities, their expressions captured in moments of lust and pleasure. Even with her car window between us, amidst the crowd of 40 or 50 onlookers, I still heard her desperate cry. "No. Oh God, no." Finally, her gaze shifted from the signs to the front window of our house, where she spotted me standing. We locked eyes. She appeared devastated, her complexion drained. Tears streamed down her cheeks. It seemed as if she was questioning me, mirroring my own bewilderment. I observed her for a moment before turning away, drawing the curtain shut behind me. Perhaps now is the time to recount how my wife, Sherry, and I ended up in this tragic situation. My name is Jack Meyer. I met Sherry during our junior year of college, introduced by a mutual friend. Instantly, I was captivated. Sherry wasn't conventionally beautiful, but she possessed an irresistible charm. Standing at 5'2" with striking blue eyes and shoulder-length blonde hair, she had a petite, yet perfectly proportioned figure that enchanted me. From that moment, I was smitten, never doubting my ability to win her heart. Sherry and I began dating, quickly becoming inseparable. Within a month, we shared our first closeness moment, an experience unlike any other. I was consumed by my love for Sherry, unable to get enough of her. Though we were not maidens, our passion for each other was all-consuming. Every moment together was blissful, every touch electric. Our love deepened over the years. After graduating, we married and settled into our first home, a condo in Van Nuys. Sherry pursued a career in real estate while I found work in electronic manufacturing. We built a life together that I believed to be perfect. For the next 13 years, we shared an idyllic existence. First in our condo and later in our dream home as our finances improved. We welcomed our children, Shelby, now 8, and Ryan, now 6, whom we adored beyond measure. Our family was our world. So, what went wrong? I wish I had the answers. I wish I had noticed the subtle signs indicating something was amiss. But I was oblivious, living in a bubble of love and trust. It took an unexpected event, our daughter Shelby falling ill at school, to uncover the truth. It was a Thursday when I received the call from the school nurse just before noon, informing me of Shelby's illness. In the midst of a staff meeting, I asked the nurse to contact my wife. Despite attempts to reach her at her office and on her cell, she was unreachable. So, the nurse called me. Recognizing the urgency of fetching my daughter, I apologized to my staff and hurried to Shelby School to retrieve her. Upon reaching home, upon opening the garage, I was startled by an unfamiliar car parked in my spot beside my wife's. Instantly, a lump formed in my throat, and my stomach churned. No, it couldn't be, I reassured myself. My wife, the woman I cherished above all else, couldn't possibly be having an affair. But why was there a strange car in the garage with the door closed? Something was amiss, and I needed answers. I couldn't expose my daughter to this uncertainty. I instructed Shelby to stay in the car for a moment, explaining that the exterminator was spraying for bugs, and the fumes could make her feel worse. It was the first time I had ever lied to her. Shelby complained about being tired and wanting to go inside, but I reassured her that I would check first before coming to get her. Later, Shelby asked me what was going on, and I reassured her that everything was fine, attributing my discomfort to the odor in the house. I left Shelby with her grandmother, promising to return for her in a couple of hours. I didn't disclose what I had witnessed, simply asking my mom to care for Shelby until I returned from work. Though tempted to return home and confront the cheating duo, I realized I needed more than a mere confrontation. I craved revenge. As I drove back to my office, I began devising plans that would bring ruin upon my wife and her boss indefinitely. The electronics firm where I worked had multiple divisions. As a senior engineer in the medical equipment division, we shared a large complex with another division specializing in commercial security equipment. Upon reaching my office, I instructed my secretary to ensure I wasn't disturbed for the rest of the afternoon, then called my counterpart in the security division. Dan Taylor, a stellar engineer and longtime friend, agreed to meet promptly. He mentioned he'd already be coming my way to drop off some blueprints for copying. I informed my secretary that Dan could enter my office as soon as he arrived. True to his word, Dan knocked on my door just 20 minutes later. I requested him to come in and close the door, noting that I needed his help. Dan remarked that I looked like I had seen a ghost, to which I responded by recounting the shocking discovery I had made earlier. I explained to Dan that I had caught my wife and her boss having an affair in our house, specifically in our bedroom. Despite the disbelief, I assured him it was true, detailing how I found them together when I came home to pick up my daughter from school. I refrained from confronting them at the moment, prioritizing my daughter's well-being by having her wait in the car while I quietly left and took her to my mom's house. Dan expressed his sympathy and asked about my plan moving forward. I admitted uncertainty, but emphasized the need for evidence, mentioning my intention to gather audio and video recordings of their encounters. I sought Dan's assistance in acquiring security cameras and microphones to discreetly place around the house. Dan questioned the certainty of there being a next time, suggesting that the incident might have been isolated. However, I dismissed this possibility, citing conversations between my wife and her boss about regular rendezvous over the past 6 months. I explained my reasoning, noting the lack of alternative locations and the convenience of my empty house during work hours. After a few more minutes of discussion, we delved into the details. Dan mentioned having access to a new beta line of wireless miniature cameras and microphones compatible with my laptop or home computer. Additionally, he had a small voice-activated recorder I could discreetly place under Sherry's car seat to capture any conversations she might have while driving. It would only record her side of the conversation, but it was better than nothing. I expressed gratitude and informed him I'd collect everything from his office the following day. Returning home that evening proved to be the most challenging task I'd ever faced. I wasn't sure if I could face my wife and pretend nothing had happened. I decided the best course of action was to make Sherry believe I wasn't feeling well, which was true. I retrieved Shelby from my mom's, and upon arriving home, Sherry was preparing dinner in the kitchen. Upon seeing Shelby with me, she grew frantic. I questioned Sherry about her whereabouts and why she hadn't informed me about Shelby's illness, mentioning that I received a message from the school nurse on the answering machine. Sherry explained that she must have accidentally turned off her phone while showing houses and had been busy all day. I couldn't help but think cynically that she was likely preoccupied with her affair with her boss instead of attending to our daughter. Despite this, Sherry hugged Shelby and apologized before helping her to bed. I acknowledged that despite her flaws, my wife did love our kids, and it seemed I was the obstacle to her happiness. Sherry then returned to the kitchen to prepare soup for Shelby and finish dinner for the rest of us. Feeling unwell myself, I informed Sherry that I would sleep in the guest room that night, just in case I was contagious. She noted that I felt clammy and looked pale. Silently, I acknowledged the irony of feeling unwell after discovering my wife's affair. Without responding, I headed upstairs, initially dreading entering the master suite, but needing my grooming supplies, toothbrush, and work attire for the next day, so I forced myself into the room. A window was open, and the scent of lovemaking had dissipated. The bed was neatly made. She must have changed the sheets. It pained me to look at it. All I could envision was her boss having lovemaking with her, whispering sweet nothings about belonging to him alone forever. Anger surged within me, but I suppressed it. I needed to remain composed until I could unleash havoc upon them both. And I would. That much was certain. I gathered my necessities and retreated to the guest bedroom, shutting the door behind me. I stripped down to my underwear and slipped into bed. My body felt rigid. I wanted to weep, but I stifled the urge. I had a mission to accomplish, and I couldn't allow emotions to interfere. For hours I lay in the darkness, sleep evading me. After tending to the kids and putting them to bed, my wife entered the room. I pretended to be asleep. She pressed her palm against my forehead before exiting the room, shutting the door behind her. Sherry typically handled taking the kids to school, so I rose early, showered, and left the house before her awakening. It probably struck her as odd, but I could simply attribute it to needing to compensate for lost time from yesterday when I felt unwell. Frankly, I didn't care much about her opinion at this point. I just wanted to be free. Free from what? Until yesterday, I believed it was a blissful marriage founded on lifelong loyalty, honesty, and commitment. How painfully mistaken I was. Arriving at work before the rest of the staff, I brewed a pot of coffee and began outlining my strategies. I realized I needed to cancel our shared credit cards, transfer half of our joint accounts to a separate bank under my sole name, alter my will, life insurance, and 401k beneficiaries, removing Sherry and naming only Shelby and Ryan. It felt like such a trivial effort to dissolve the last 13 years of my life. It should have been more challenging. Deep down, I suspected it would become harder at some point. I also understood the necessity of securing a competent divorce attorney to protect myself from Sherry's potential exploitation. Being in a no-fault divorce state, infidelity wouldn't significantly affect the financial settlement, but it might aid in retaining custody of my children. Sherry had demonstrated my insignificance in her life, yet she was a devoted mother, and I didn't want to deprive her of her children. I merely sought joint custody to ensure I remained a vital presence in their lives. I fought to suppress thoughts of our love life and the humiliation of overhearing my wife praise her lover's superiority to me in every aspect. If I allowed myself to dwell on it now, I'd begin to doubt myself, which I couldn't afford at the moment. That reckoning would come later, and when it did, it would likely devastate me. With my to-do list complete, I phoned Dan's office. He assured me everything would be ready by noon and offered to assist me in installing and operating the equipment. As I attempted to focus on clearing paperwork from my desk, I noticed Sherry's call on my cell phone. Despite her typically affectionate tone, her voice only fueled my anger this time. Sherry expressed concern about my well-being, mentioning that she hadn't been able to check on me before I left that morning. I responded vaguely, stating that I needed to clear my head. She suggested an idea to make me feel better that evening, but internally, I couldn't help but feel resentful and deceived by her lies. However, I kept my response neutral, indicating that we would see. Sherry commented on my apparent lack of interest, to which I replied that I was preoccupied, rather than uninterested. We agreed to meet at home by 6, and she reassured me that she would be in the office all day if I needed to reach her. I phoned Dan, who confirmed everything was prepared, instructing me to meet him at the loading dock entrance. We loaded all the equipment into Dan's van, and with both of us working on the installation, we had it all set up and tested by 3:30. Then, we installed the software on my home office PC and configured a secure folder to collect and store everything captured by the cameras and microphones. We strategically placed bugs in the living room, kitchen, guest bedroom, and, notably, the master suite, ensuring the latter had 4 cameras to capture nearly every activity. As an additional measure, we installed a camera and microphone in the master bathroom, just in case the couple decided to shower together after their encounter. The system was motion-activated, with the cameras triggering the microphones. I was prepared. That night was exceptionally challenging for me. After dinner, and once the kids were asleep, I followed my wife to our bedroom. I turned away from her and pretended to fall asleep. Sherry noticed the change in our usual routine and asked if everything was all right. I expressed some insecurities about whether I was enough for her, to which she reassured me that I was more than enough and that she couldn't bear anything happening to me. She emphasized that I was her perfect lover. Despite her reassurances, I remained distant and brushed off her concern, stating that nothing was bothering me. I feigned exhaustion, closed my eyes, and attempted to sleep. Later, I heard Sherry softly crying. I felt no sympathy for her, but I pondered whether her tears stemmed from shame for her actions or from feeling mistreated by me again. I rose before her and seized the chance to place the voice recorder beneath the seat of her car. I also reviewed the video and audio recordings from the installed equipment, confirming that everything from the previous night was captured clearly, even in the dim nighttime conditions of our bedroom. Initially, Sherry was a bit curt, mentioning that I had said some hurtful things the night before. Then, she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, and her demeanor shifted to cheerful. Perhaps it was due to her afternoon plans with her boss. I poured her a cup of coffee and informed her that I'd be locked in my office all day. She mentioned having to show several homes that afternoon and expressed confidence in making a significant sale, but assured she'd be able to pick up Shelby and Ryan after school. With a peck on her cheek, I headed towards the garage door. Sherry reminded me that I had forgotten to say, "I love you." She emphasized how important it was for her to hear those words from me every morning. I apologized, explaining that there was a lot on my mind, but Sherry insisted that it was important for her to hear those words. I promised not to forget in the future, and with that, I left. Yeah, I'll tell some girl how much I love her if and when I ever find another girl I can trust enough to fall in love with. The intel Sherry provided about showing homes all afternoon led me to think she'd probably be with her true love. I hoped so. I was tired of games and wanted this ordeal done. I spent the morning working in my office but kept glancing at my watch. Finally, at noon, I told my secretary I'd be gone for a few hours and put my plan in motion. I borrowed a company van and parked across from my house, waiting to see what happened. It wasn't until nearly 1 o'clock that I saw Sherry's car arrive, open the garage door, and park in her usual spot. When she entered the house without closing the garage, I figured she was either leaving again or expecting someone. 10 minutes later, I realized she was expecting someone as the same car from the day I caught them pulled into the garage, taking my place, just as he had taken my place in my wife's life. I saw him get out of the car and the garage door closed. I had to give it to them. They had the nerve to meet in my house, in my bed, to carry out their affair. It just proved they thought they wouldn't get caught or didn't care. Well, they'd soon find out they were wrong. They were caught. And I'd make sure they both cared with this final proof of my wife's infidelity. And knowing I'd soon have all the visual proof I needed of their affair, I finally let the tears fall. For 13 years, I was convinced my loving wife would never cheat on me, just as I'd never cheat on her. With the tears came doubts. Was he a better lover? Maybe better looking, but neither of us was exceptional. Why risk our marriages? I desperately wanted to confront them. But why? What would it achieve? I'd catch them, but I'd already done that once. Would I feel better by confronting her lover? Yes, but I'd likely go to jail. By this time, neither of them were worth it. My only worry was how this would affect my kids and his, as I was prepared to confront him, just as he had confronted me. By 2:30, they must have finished, as the garage door opened and he left 15 minutes later. My wife did the same, closing the garage door behind her. I knew she'd return home with the kids by 3:30, so I quickly parked in the garage and made my way to my home office. I didn't want to review all the footage, just ensure the evidence was safely on my hard drive. After 10 minutes, I'd had my fill. It wasn't an exact replay of their previous encounter, but it was explicit. They began by having lovemaking on the kitchen table where I eat. They joked about how many times they wondered if I'd ever realize I was dining where he had been closeness with her so often. Then, they moved to our bedroom, though not before her lover suggested using my daughter's room for a change of scenery. My wife adamantly refused, stating it was off-limits to involve their kids' rooms. At least she seemed to have some principles, just not concerning me. In the bedroom, they resumed their activities. I noticed neither of them expressed love, but my wife continued to praise her boss as the best lover she'd ever had. However, I couldn't comprehend why they then moved to the throw rug by the living room fireplace, where they engaged once more when finished. I found it strange that she didn't bother changing the sheets, assuming she would do so when she returned with the kids at 3:30. This gave her plenty of time to air out the room and remove any evidence. Since I rarely arrived home before 6 and had secured the evidence I needed on my hard drive, I shut down the system and left the house without bothering to check the assumed mess on our marriage bed. I'd seen enough, and although my heart was hardened against my wife, I still felt sick inside, a sickness soon replaced by burning anger and hatred. I may have even smiled, knowing the hell I was about to unleash on their cheating heads. Back at work, I briefed Dan on everything. Like me, he couldn't comprehend how a supposedly loving wife like Sherry could do what was now clear. Not only did she break our sacred vows, but she also went out of her way to humiliate me to her lover, always affirming his superiority. All these thoughts plunged my soul into a deep abyss of pain and despair, from which I knew I had to emerge to complete my task of destroying them both. I needed to find a good divorce lawyer, and Dan suggested contacting the law firm the company used for recommendations. I spoke to a corporate lawyer there who gave me 3 names of divorce lawyers known for protecting husbands' rights. The first one was retiring and not taking new clients, but the second one agreed to meet me the next afternoon at 3. With that settled, I resolved to handle canceling credit cards, changing beneficiaries, and transferring funds the next morning. When I returned home that night, Sherry was in the kitchen preparing dinner while the kids did their homework in their rooms. She wore a yellow sundress and looked beautiful. For a moment, I thought my heart would break all over again. She was smiling and seemed so happy. I assumed it was her usual post-afternoon delight mood. She greeted me and asked about my day, mentioning that hers was great due to making a sale. I responded with mild interest, aware of the reason behind her happiness. I asked if anything else notable happened that day, or if she met any interesting people, to which she denied, stating that she was focused on work to return home to her family. Despite her reassurance, I couldn't shake the suspicion of her affair as I headed upstairs to change clothes. While changing, I noticed the sheets had been replaced and the room aired out. Upon returning to the kitchen, I mentioned the water on the shower floor and asked if she had showered that afternoon. She appeared startled and denied it, suggesting a possible clogged drain. I speculated about the possibility of someone sneaking into the house for a rendezvous and showering afterward, which seemed to unsettle her. She attempted to brush it off with humor. As dinner progressed, conversation was minimal. I surprised Sherry by switching seats with her, prompting her to question the change. I explained it as a desire for a change of scenery. She appeared puzzled and ate little, mainly moving food around on her plate. During dinner, the kids talked about their day, but Sherry and I mostly listened, making occasional comments. After we all helped clean the dishes, I returned to my office to work on my project. I reviewed footage from that day and selected suitable stills to turn into photographs, which I downloaded to a photo file for printing. Next, I carefully crafted wording for the signs I would create with the photographs. All that remained was to visit my lawyer to initiate the divorce, get my finances in order, and await the next visit from my wife and her lover. When I finally went to bed that night, Sherry was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. I was fairly certain my actions that evening had given her something to ponder. Not that it mattered. There was nothing she could say or do to change my mind about divorcing her for her infidelity. And there was a small silver lining in the fact that I believe I'd managed to make her at least somewhat uneasy. Today was Tuesday, and she had mentioned making another sale on Thursday, so I took that as a signal that she and her lover would be meeting on that day. That would also mark the day I brought them down. The following morning, I rose early again, showered, and left before Sherry woke up. I had a lot to accomplish and wanted to allocate as much time as possible to get it done. My lawyer appointment wasn't until 3, so I had plenty of time to handle all the financial matters. First, I visited HR, where I changed the beneficiary on my life insurance and 401k from Sherry to Shelby and Ryan. I received some odd looks from the woman assisting me, but I didn't feel obligated to explain my actions to her or anyone else. Next, I canceled all our joint credit cards and obtained new ones in my name alone. Then, I proceeded to the bank, where I transferred half of the funds from our joint checking and savings accounts to another bank in my name. I knew I needed to address our home, but I presumed the courts would allow Sherry to stay there with the kids, so I postponed action on that front until I consulted with my lawyer. At 3, I met with my lawyer, finding him to be agreeable enough. He cautioned me that since we were in a no-fault state, Sherry would likely get custody of Shelby and Ryan, and I'd lose the house and half of everything else to my wife, even with proof of her infidelity. I instructed him on how I wanted the petition written, and when he expressed doubt about my chances of taking nearly everything from her, I reassured him. I was confident I could persuade her to agree to whatever I wanted. He wasn't pleased, but he complied with my demands, assuring me he would have everything prepared for her to be served Friday morning. I also had him draft papers to file against her boss and his company for intentionally wrecking my marriage. Those documents would also be ready by Friday morning. I was prepared. When I returned home that evening, I kept my demeanor cool towards Sherry. Frankly, I had reached my limit and just wanted the whole ordeal to end so I could move on with my life. I knew there was still a lot of pain and heartache ahead, but I acknowledged there was no turning back. Besides, I'd finally be sharing the anguish and misery with my unfaithful wife and her despicable lover. After a subdued dinner with minimal conversation, I retired to my study, printed the photos of the lovers I intended to use, and crafted the signs without interruption. I also found time to compose a letter to Greg Allen's wife, enclosing prints of the large photos I planned to use on the posters, informing her that I had plenty of video evidence to provide her in case she decided to divorce her husband, as I was divorcing mine. Shortly after 11, I went to our bedroom to ensure Sherry was asleep, then made my way to her car, retrieved the voice-activated recorder from beneath her seat, rewound it, and listened to its contents. I overheard one side of a conversation that sounded like it was with Greg. The caller expressed gratitude for their time together that afternoon and mentioned missing Greg after they were together. They discussed the idea of spending a whole week together and fabricated a story about a real estate convention they must attend. The caller mentioned having to give Jack occasional attention to keep him happy, but expressed a desire to be exclusively with Greg. They confirmed plans for Thursday afternoon and ended the call. I was taken aback to discover that her words didn't sting as much as they had in the past. Perhaps there was still hope for me after all. Little did she realize how soon she would belong solely to him forever, and the knowledge that I was just one day away from dismantling their comfortable lives filled me with a sense of satisfaction. Revenge, I was realizing, wielded formidable power. I swapped out the tape with a fresh one and returned the recorder under her seat, hoping it would capture evidence of her anguish the next day when her world crumbled. I hardly slept a wink that night, not because I was heartbroken. I had surpassed that. No, my sleeplessness stemmed from the anticipation of everything I hoped would unfold the following day. For the last time, I rose from bed. While Sherry continued to slumber, I stood gazing at the woman who had once been my love, the mother of my children, the woman I had imagined spending the rest of my days with. Tears welled in my eyes as I realized I had shared my bed with her for the final time. Never again would our bodies entwine in passion. Never again would we cuddle or discuss our future. Our future was non-existent, and as I turned away from her and departed, I pondered whether she comprehended the toll she was about to pay for betraying me. She likely didn't, but she would soon learn. After showering, I left the house, stopped for breakfast at a diner, then briefly swung by work to inform my secretary of my absence for the day. I phoned Dan and briefed him on the impending events. He wished me luck, cautioned me to be cautious, and requested that I keep him updated on the proceedings. I made a brief visit to my lawyer's office to ensure all was in order for serving my wife and Greg Allen the following day. Following that, I called my wife to arrange picking up the kids from school. My mother had expressed a desire to have them for the long weekend, since they had no school on Friday. Thus, I planned to swing by the house around 3:45 to gather some belongings and transport the kids directly to Mom's. She enthusiastically approved, even suggesting we spend Saturday in bed together in her most seductive tone. I agreed nonchalantly before ending the call. I had reached a point where I couldn't tolerate her deceit any longer. I took my time returning home. By 12:30, I was parked nearby, awaiting the imminent events. My car was mostly concealed from view, but I had a clear line of sight to any vehicle entering my driveway. I didn't need to witness the garage door's movements. My wife and her lover were nothing if not predictable, and I was familiar with their routine. At 12:50, Sherry's car rolled into the driveway, followed 5 minutes later by Greg Allen's. The trap was set, and I was poised to ensnare them. I should have felt anguish knowing my wife and her boss were engaging in pleasure in our marital bed while I waited around the corner for them to finish. Yet, she had lost her ability to inflict pain upon me. It was astonishing how composed I felt as I envisioned the activities I knew they were engaging in together. It was almost reminiscent of recalling a low-budget adult film, lacking in substance but with a satisfying conclusion around 10 minutes to 3. I observed Allen's car reverse out of the driveway and depart. 10 minutes later, Sherry followed suit. Sweet. As she drove off, I observed her applying fresh lipstick. Once they were out of sight, I pulled into my garage and shut the door. With limited time on my hands, I headed to my office and reviewed the footage from that afternoon's encounter. Everything was captured, including the hurtful insults about his superiority in bed compared to me. However, this time, their words didn't affect me. After ensuring the footage was securely stored on my hard drive, I spent the next 10 minutes carrying my handcrafted signs, adorned with their photographs, upstairs and positioning them near the front door for easy access. Then, I packed essentials like a toothbrush and clothes for Shelby and Ryan into my car. The only remorse I felt about my impending actions was for the pain I was about to inflict on my beloved children. Yet, I found solace in knowing I hadn't caused the pain of their parents' separation. That responsibility rested solely on their mother's shoulders. She chose to engage in a prolonged affair, ultimately tearing our family apart. At 3:15, I drove to their school and was waiting when the final bell rang to pick them up. I informed them they'd spend the weekend with Grandma, which thrilled them given her penchant for spoiling them. 45 minutes later, I dropped them off and returned home, ready to set my plan in motion. And thus, we come full circle to where we began. Bed, table, and rug displayed on the lawn adorned with signs, watched by neighbors, awaiting Sherry's return to the dreadful truth that I held all the knowledge. That night, I expected to hear from Sherry, but I didn't. There was a late call from her cell phone, but when I answered, silence greeted me. An hour after Sherry departed, the police paid me a visit. While understanding, they insisted I remove the signs and photographs to avoid disturbing the peace and public indecency charges. I complied. They served their purpose, seen by my wife, and from the look on her face before I turned away, I knew her life had begun its descent into chaos. That evening I drowned my sorrows in a substantial amount of Maker's Mark and drifted into an alcoholic stupor. Friday morning greeted me with a monstrous hangover, yet despite it, I felt empowered. Though saddened and alone, I found strength in knowing I had subdued my anger long enough to exact revenge on my unfaithful wife and her lover. By noon, I glimpsed out the front window to find the rug, kitchen table, and bed gone, leaving only the mattress and stained sheets behind. I'd dispose of those later. The morning passed uneventfully, but by 3 in the afternoon, chaos erupted. I was certain that Greg Adams' wife had received the letter and photographs that morning, and my lawyer had informed me that both Sherry and Greg Adams, along with his partners, had been served at their workplaces. He recounted how Sherry collapsed in tears upon being served, while Greg Adams disregarded her, unleashing threats against me. His partners retreated behind closed doors for 15 minutes before emerging to present Sherry with her final check and informing Greg that his partnership was terminated. When he informed them of his refusal to sell to them, they cited their corporate bylaws morality clause regarding love fraternization with staff members. This provision empowered them to sever all ties with him and his mistress. Concurrently, the receptionist at the front desk relayed that his wife was on the phone urgently requesting to speak with him. She had received a letter and photos I had sent, informing him not to return home and notifying him of her intent to file for divorce the following day. Later, I was informed by one of the agency employees' husbands that after Adams was escorted out of the building, everyone turned their backs on my soon-to-be ex-wife. She remained on the floor for about 30 minutes, crying inconsolably. Eventually, she gathered herself enough to leave, though no one knew her whereabouts. The next day, Sherry finally called me, sounding distraught. She inquired about the children and whether they knew about the situation. I assured her they were safe at my mother's and wouldn't hear the details from me. She thanked me for my discretion and asked to retrieve some belongings, to which I agreed, offering to leave for a few hours. She requested to stay and talk, but I declined, leading to more tears from her. She pleaded for my understanding, expressing remorse and claiming she never intended to hurt me. I laughed at her apology, questioning how she could claim innocence when she had expressed love and longing for her lover, comparing him favorably to me. I accused her of betraying me with her words to him, saying I had recordings of her confessing these feelings. Despite her denial, I insisted that her words were recorded, and nothing she said could change how I felt about her. She professed her love for me, claiming she had always loved only me, and didn't understand why she said those things to Greg. She explained that she had done it to boost his ego because he complained about his wife. I questioned her explanation, pointing out that she had torn me down to him and had lovemaking with him for 6 months. She insisted she never meant to hurt me and didn't mean any of it. When I pressed her for an explanation, she admitted that it felt dirty with Greg and that she felt she should be dirty with him, keeping it separate from what she had with me, which she described as loving and clean. I expressed disbelief at her actions and called her sick, admitting my own foolishness for not seeing it sooner. She begged for a chance to make it right, insisting that she loved only me and belonged to me. She pleaded for forgiveness and offered to come to me immediately, begging me not to leave her. I informed Sherry that I no longer loved her and that she was the one who left me. I condemned her actions with Greg over the past 6 months, stating that her behavior proved she didn't love me. I expressed disgust towards her and eagerly awaited her departure from my life. I rejected any possibility of reconciliation, expressing my disdain for her after what she had done with Greg. I emphasized that any future interaction would only be for the sake of our children, whom she had also damaged. I explained that while I wanted to spare our children pain, I had no intention of sparing her any consequences for her actions. I wanted her to feel the same pain she had caused me and Greg's wife. When she questioned why I told Greg's wife about their affair, I retorted that what she and Greg did was unfair to me and our children. I justified informing Greg's wife by highlighting the destruction of my family, the betrayal of our marital vows, and the need for Greg's wife to know the truth. Sherry expressed her desire to fight for our marriage, stating that she didn't want a divorce. I responded by saying there was nothing left to fight for and that I would rather die than remain married to her. I accused her of being delusional and out of her mind. She urged me to read the divorce petition she served me with, claiming that if I agreed to joint custody for our children, I could stay in the house and receive half of our assets. However, she threatened to share the videos of her affair if I didn't agree to her terms. When I doubted her willingness to follow through with the threat, she insisted that she could and would do it out of hatred towards me. She pleaded with me to sign the divorce papers, but I remained firm in my decision. In the end, she begged me to sign the papers, but I refused, insisting that she should sign them instead. After hanging up on her, Sherry signed the divorce papers, and the divorce was finalized in 6 months. She now lives with Shelby and Ryan in our former home, while I reside in a nearby condo. Despite the divorce, We remained in the same school district to minimize disruption for the kids, although they still felt the pain of the breakup. Shelby disclosed that their mother acknowledged her mistake, accepting that our marriage couldn't overcome it. However, we reassured the kids that we would always be there for them. As for what Sherry told her parents and sister about the breakup, I'm uncertain, but they still communicate with me, indicating she likely didn't place blame solely on me. My mother perceived the divorce as something neither Sherry nor I could move past. I had the chance to retrieve the audio recorder from Sherry's car one last time, capturing a memorable conversation. She called Greg and thanked him for their time together, expressing concern about my suspicions and suggesting they pause their affair temporarily. Upon arriving home, she discovered signs and photographs revealing my knowledge of her infidelity, leading to her panic and realization of the consequences. She called Greg in distress, informing him that I knew everything about their affair, and broke down into tears. It's been over a year since we endured those trying times, and gradually, I'm beginning to piece things back together. I still steer clear of dating, and will likely continue to do so for a while. The idea of reliving what I've just gone through makes me wary of diving into another serious relationship. Shelby mentioned that her mom went on one date but returned home in tears, and as far as she knows, hasn't dated since. Sherry found work as a receptionist in a retirement village and has put her real estate career on hold, at least for now. I've never found out if she keeps in touch with Greg Allen, and frankly, I don't care. Greg Allen and his wife divorced, and he's been struggling to find employment. Even though I didn't share the videos of their closeness encounters with anyone, Sherry knew I wasn't sympathetic towards Greg. It seems many businesses are wary of hiring someone with a reputation for seducing married women and causing marriages to dissolve. Although I blurred Sherry's face in the videos, I retained all the audio. I recently heard that Greg's ex-wife is dating a kind police officer, and it appears to be serious. Good for her. Speaking of Greg's former employer, to avoid negative publicity, they offered me a generous settlement to prevent a lawsuit. I accepted. As far as I'm concerned, that chapter is closed for now. My focus is solely on my children and their future. Perhaps one day, my own future will take precedence as well.
Hello? I'm in my late 30s. I've always had girlfriends, but never felt confident enough to get married. So I've been living single. I majored in Chinese and lived in China for over 5 years. At the request of an acquaintance last summer, I started tutoring a first grader named Oliver in Chinese. Oliver, having graduated from an English kindergarten, speaks English well, but was also eager to learn Chinese. So I was introduced by a mutual friend to tutor him. I happily agreed to also help him prepare for Chinese proficiency exams. Oliver's family home was quite spacious and well organized. When I first met Oliver's mother, I was struck by her beauty. She looked like she was in her mid-20s, though she said she was in her early 30s, having married right after college. She was slim and tall, easily over 5'7". Oliver, taking after his mother, was a handsome boy with distinct features. He was a bright child, understanding more than what was taught, doing his homework well and having good pronunciation. He has a 3-year-old sister who was incredibly cute. I heard Oliver's grandmother lived in the same apartment complex and would often come over to look after her grandchildren. I had the chance to meet her during my first lesson. Oliver's mother mentioned she needed to go to a community center for her daughter's class, so she asked her mother to stay with Oliver during our Chinese lessons. Oliver's grandmother, also quite beautiful, seemed to have passed down her looks. She mentioned she was preparing to become a senior model and needed to practice for interviews in English and Chinese. After Oliver's lesson, she expressed a desire to have private lessons at her place on a different day, since she needed to look after her granddaughter. I informed her of my availability, and we agreed on weekly lessons every Friday afternoon at her home. Despite offering a family discount, she insisted on paying the full price, mentioning she heard her grandson was enjoying the lessons and learning well. She humbly asked for patience as she might learn slower due to her age. I learned she was in her mid-50s, but she was very motivated and had surprisingly good pronunciation, and it was lovely to see her practice consistently. She mentioned she had a lot to do besides foreign language interviews. For starters, she takes care of her appearance and gets treatments at a local skincare clinic. She also makes it a point to shower at home and apply a facial mask every day. She offered to help me with a mask after class when we had a moment, and I agreed. You just have to sit in a chair and apply it, but lying down on the couch and relaxing for 20 minutes works too, she said. Having only ever used lotion my whole life, that day was my first time trying a face mask. I didn't like the cold feeling of the mask sheet on my face, but after washing it off, my skin tone seemed noticeably brighter. Having a job that requires a lot of talking, my throat often feels scratchy, and I need to present a clean appearance to my students. Realizing I hadn't been taking care of my skin made me think I should start. None of my past girlfriends ever paid attention to my skin, but I found Oliver's grandmother to be quite thoughtful. One day after class, she showed me a home workout channel on YouTube. The exercises looked easy to follow at a glance. "Would you like to try it?" she asked. So we turned on the smart TV in the living room and started exercising. It looked easy, but I was sweating profusely after a while. As I was fanning myself, she said, "I'm sweating too, so I'm going to take a quick shower. You should take one too," and went to the bedroom. I never imagined what would happen next when we exercised. I noticed her body didn't have an ounce of fat. Impressive for someone in her 50s. The bathroom had a pleasantly scented soap, not some cheap supermarket brand, but a pretty natural soap. After lightly washing up and changing clothes, she came out in a cute home dress. Honestly, I was a bit smitten. It was my first time feeling this way about an older woman. Thanks to Oliver's grandmother, I got to do a face mask and exercise. It was so much fun, I said as I was leaving. She looked at me and said, "If you have time, let's have a beer." I was planning to have a beer at home anyway, so it worked out well, and I sat down on the couch. She brought out homemade sweet potato chips and stout. I've been having so much fun preparing to be a senior model. I've always exercised and taken care of my skin, but studying with you has been such a joy, she said. Her mood turned somber as she recalled her late husband. She mentioned that Oliver's mom passed away from a terrible illness within 2 months of getting sick while she was in college. The thought of living without her husband was daunting, but she smiled and said that those who are left behind must go on living. She moved closer to her daughter to alleviate her loneliness by spending time with her grandchildren. She also mentioned that becoming a senior model was her son-in-law's suggestion, noting that she hadn't seen anyone her age with such good skin and youthful appearance. I cautiously asked if she still felt lonely without her husband. She admitted that while being busy with her grandchildren keeps her mind off her late husband, she feels truly alone when she returns home. She expressed skepticism about the men others have tried to introduce to her, wishing for someone cultured like me. Our connection was undeniable, and by the next morning, I had come to my senses. Unable to wait for our next lesson, I found myself at her house late at night. I'm unsure if it's appropriate to continue this relationship with my student. She's been widowed for over 10 years and hinted at the difficulty of those years, making it hard for me to leave her alone.
Pleased with her efforts, she looked into my eyes and asked, "This was amazing. When will I see you again?" I smiled and replied, "I'll call you soon." She leaned in and grabbed the $100 bills from the nightstand, hesitating at the smaller stack of $100 bills. I said, "Take it as a tip." She grinned, took the second pile, and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. As she walked to the door, she turned back and said, "Merry Christmas." Her mercenary look shattered my fantasy. Alone in the room, I realized there was no love, no companionship, just an expensive escape in a Las Vegas hotel. "Merry Christmas," I muttered, rolling over to sleep. When I woke, I reviewed the weekend. Despite last night's expense, I still had a $3,500 profit from blackjack. My goal was $5,000 by week's end, but it would be harder now. Each Vegas trip followed strict rules. Only blackjack, no drinking or playing when tired, avoiding attention, spreading bets across casinos and leaving once the goal was met. I had strategies like changing my appearance and varying my goals. I never played big money tables, preferring the $10 minimum. Sometimes I'd pretend to lose by making foolish plays after ordering drinks. I never cashed in all my chips at once to avoid detection. Despite precautions, I knew I'd eventually be caught and banned. I had a talent for numbers and a photographic memory, giving me an edge in card counting, which casinos considered cheating. I knew the risks, but started when I desperately needed money. Now it was a way to recover what I'd lost, though some things, like my career and Laura, were gone forever. Once a respected math professor, I now debated whether to hit or stand. Laura's betrayal and my rival's schemes had ruined me. Reflecting on my downfall, I wondered how this hand would play out. I remembered my first day at the university as an assistant professor. I was lost on campus trying to find the math department when a student helped me. I then navigated the maze of offices to find the head of the department, Dr. Ben Stevens. After timidly knocking on his door, I was invited in by a loud voice. Inside, I met an elderly man behind a desk cluttered with files. "Ah, you must be Reed. Are you hungry? Let's get some food and Guinness. On you," he said. That was my introduction to Dr. Stevens. Over lunch and a few beers, he insisted I call him Ben and introduced me to everyone in the department. The next morning, hungover and unsure of anything, I returned to his office. He loudly discussed my class assignments and gave me a rundown of the school's dynamics for hours. The English department feuds with the Spanish department. Nobody likes the French, and few find the German department. The Oriental languages are the rising stars. Chemistry gets along with biology, but not botany. Astronomy is laid back. History keeps to themselves, and poli-sci is always causing trouble. Sports teams are inept but overfunded. At lunchtime, Ben took me to a biker bar, where he was well known for restoring motorcycles. He was working on a 1940 Indian Chief, and everyone was eager for the unveiling. After a long afternoon at the bar, I stumbled home, wondering how long my liver could keep up. The next day, still groggy, I went back to Ben's office. "Well, Reed, it was 50-50ths on whether you'd show up with a tattoo today," he joked. We discussed the upcoming student orientation and his management style, which gave professors a lot of autonomy. He then showed me my office, commenting on the pros and cons of each classroom. "The acoustics in your main classroom are terrible, but the bad heating will keep students awake," he said. He explained that office location indicated one's rank in the department. At the end of the hall, we found a maintenance worker painting a door with "Annex Office of Dr. Jason Fader." Ben, confused and upset, asked, "What happened?" The worker explained that he had been told Ben changed his mind about the office assignment. Ben calmly requested to see the office, clearly frustrated by the situation. Tom followed Ben's order and opened the door. Inside, the office was furnished with plush furniture, chic decor, and new equipment, including a state-of-the-art computer. Ben examined the setup and turned to me, saying, "It looks like Dr. Fader spent his entire budget updating your office, Reed. Congrats." He then instructed Tom, "Change the locks as ordered. Do not give a key to Dr. Fader. No one is to remove anything without my permission. The sign on the door will say Dr. James Reed." As we walked away, Ben said, "I've put you in the middle of a power play by our associate professor, but I'll teach him a lesson." I frowned. "I don't remember meeting him on Monday." Ben laughed. "You didn't? He ignored my invitation, probably because he's an idiot." We went to a pizza parlor, and many early arrival students stopped by to chat with Ben. It was clear he loved interacting with them. On Thursday, I finally met Dr. Jason Fader while working in my new office. Hearing the doorknob rattle, I opened the door to an angry man. "What are you doing in my annex?" he demanded. "Good morning. I'm assuming you are Dr. Fader. I'm James Reed, the new assistant professor," I said, offering my hand. He ignored it. "What are you doing in my office?" he repeated. "Dr. Stevens assigned me this office with the furnishings," I replied. Fader went ballistic, ranting in the hallway. I stayed calm as he insulted Ben. "I don't care what that old fool said. You're leaving." "I will leave only if Dr. Stevens tells me," I replied. He assured me I'd be out in 10 minutes and stormed off to Ben's office. Ben's secretary, Mary, witnessed the rant, so Ben was forewarned. 30 minutes later, Fader returned, furious. "I'm here to get my furnishings," he said through gritted teeth. "Dr. Stevens expressly said only he can authorize removal," I told him, sparking another tantrum. Finally, I suggested, "Join us for lunch with Dr. Stevens to discuss it." Fader told me to go screw myself. I locked my office and headed to Ben's office. Ben had promised to show me the best burger joint in town. As I bit into the cheeseburger, I admitted it was the best I'd ever had. Over beer, Ben and I compared notes on Fader's visit. It was clear neither of us would be getting a Christmas card from him. On Saturday, Ben hosted a faculty get-together at his house. I arrived early and met his wife, Terry. She graciously accepted the wine I brought and introduced me to everyone. Between conversations, Terry shared stories about Ben, making me like him even more. She revealed they couldn't have children, which had strengthened their bond, but left them wondering what might have been. Terry gave me a touching compliment, saying Ben thought of me as a son. I was moved to tears. "Damn, boy, I thought only Terry could make people cry," Ben joked, appearing behind us. He then took me to his immaculate shop to show me his restored 1940 Indian motorcycle, explaining how he had brought it back to life from a junkyard find. "Something this beautiful deserves a second chance," he said, and I agreed. As the party ended, Terry and Ben saw me out. Terry kissed me on the cheek and invited me to dine with them any time. Ben joked, "I already see too much of you during the week, and I won't let you bother me on weekends." With a twinkle in his eye, he suggested I help him restore his bike projects on Saturdays. That first semester, I relied on Ben for advice and soon saw him as a mentor. We had a standing lunch date every Thursday, and after the first week, Ben insisted on treating me. I started mastering my courses and focusing on math theorems. I had a natural talent for numbers, which earned me a nerd label in high school. As an undergrad, I excelled in math and continued to pursue my studies, earning my master's and doctorate. Despite job offers, I chose an assistant professorship to work on equations. With Ben's guidance, we spent afternoons working on equations, eventually publishing Variation and a Proposed Answer to the Hodge Conjecture. The paper sparked debates and brought attention to our work. However, Dr. Jacob Fader criticized it, causing some internal conflict. In my second year, I continued refining my theory, with Ben as my sounding board. My office moved next to Ben's, indicating I was being groomed for his position when he retired. I also received tenure, which Fader opposed, accusing Ben of favoritism. An independent review cleared Ben, but the infighting took a toll on him. When I became an associate professor, the assistant professor position reopened. To avoid criticism, Ben formed a vetting committee, including Fader. Fader opposed any candidate favorable to Ben or me. Then Laura Simmons walked in. Her credentials and charm impressed everyone, especially Fader. After she left, Fader raved about her, and Ben and I agreed. Laura became the new assistant professor. As we left the room, I told Ben, "Give Laura my cold, drafty classroom." He asked why, and I said, "Because with her looks, every male student will need a cold shower." He laughed and kept my classroom, but reassigned my freshman courses. At Ben and Terry's annual party, I saw Laura alone with an empty wine glass. I approached her and she smiled. "Hello, I'm James Reed," I said. "Hello, Dr. Reed. It's an honor to work with you," she replied. "Call me James or Reed like Ben does." "Reed suits you. Call me Laura," she said with a smile. Ben joined us, joking, "Reed, you've proven yourself as more than a poor lunch companion." He then offered Laura a tour, adding, "Let's go find my wife in this crowd." As I watched Ben lead Laura away, I felt a void. I made sure to keep bumping into her at the party, engaging in small talk. We grew more comfortable around each other. I got her another glass of wine and saw her talking to Jason Fader. When I handed her the glass, she thanked me. Fader looked annoyed and dismissed me from their conversation. I didn't want to cause any problems for Ben or Terry, so I joined Terry, who watched Fader and Laura with disapproval. "This is the first time Jason has attended one of our parties," she said. "It's obvious why he came." "Where's Ben?" I asked. "He's hiding in the shop, disgusted by Jason. Are you going to join him?" Terry responded. "No, I'll head home. Tell Ben I'll be at the office tomorrow and we'll help him with the BSA bike in the evening," I said, leaving with a hug from Terry. Saturday, I spent the day at the office but couldn't stop thinking about Laura. Frustrated, I went to Ben's shop. Ben greeted me with, "About time you showed up. I had to replace you with another mechanic." Laura was there in casual clothes. Clearly no work had been done. "Laura and Terry decided we need to go out to eat, and it's your treat," Ben continued. We laughed and agreed. We went to an Italian restaurant that ignored the dress code due to Ben's long patronage. The bill was high, but sitting next to Laura made it worth it. Later, at a jazz bar, I asked Laura to dance. As we swayed, she leaned away and said, "I should be angry with you." "Why?" I asked, puzzled. "You left me with Jason Fader. He made my skin crawl and told me to follow him home." I apologized, and she said I could make it up by taking her out on Friday. We started dating and soon became exclusive, despite Fader's continued attempts to see Laura. She joined Ben and me in our work on the Hodge conjecture, and Fader often tried to interrupt us. He even offered to help, but failed to drive a wedge between us. After the school year, Laura and I got married. For 4 years, I was blissfully married to the loveliest woman. I enjoyed my work and friendship with Ben and restored a 1969 Harley-Davidson Electra Glide. The only issue was that the Hodge conjecture still eluded me. One day, frustrated with my equations, I thought about how to inspire kids in math. I realized our elementary education was lacking and conceived an idea to create entertaining math shows for kids using the university's broadcasting system and celebrities. Saturday evening, we went to Ben's to grill steaks. After dinner, I brought up my idea. "Guys, education at the preschool and elementary levels is failing American kids in math. We need to create entertaining shows that teach basic math principles. We can use the university's broadcasting system and invite celebrities to teach math in a fun way." This sparked a discussion, and I saw Ben and Laura getting excited about the idea. I planned to push for them to co-host the shows once everything was set. The shows premiered to great success, syndicating nationwide and generating revenue for the university, as well as enriching Ben, Laura, and me. Laura and Ben became well known, while I stayed busy writing scripts. This break from the Hodge conjecture was a relief. I also co-authored several math textbooks and discussed having children with Laura, but she objected to the timing. Unexpectedly, Ben announced his retirement to emeritus status, recommending me as his replacement. I was emotional at the thought of replacing him, but prepared for the process. At the open hearing, I was ready for my promotion, but things took a turn when Karen Hudgens accused me of coercing her into an affair. I protested my innocence, but the committee allowed her to continue. I saw Laura in tears and felt devastated. Karen's roommates corroborated her allegations, and Laura left during the testimony. Given the chance to speak, I denied all allegations and requested an investigation. The committee quickly decided not to promote me. I left, finding that Laura had packed and left me. I went to Ben, who was shocked and supportive, suggesting we fight back. But my priority was finding Laura. Despite my efforts, I couldn't locate Laura. The university made Jason Fader interim department head and evicted me from my office. Weeks later, I received a call from Terry at 2 a.m. Ben had died of a heart attack before I arrived at the hospital. We struggled through the funeral, and Terry decided to move to Florida to be with her sister, leaving me feeling completely alone. Soon after, the university promoted Fader to Ben's position. He summoned me to his office, making me wait 2 hours before accusing me of plagiarism. When I asked who accused me, he grinned and said my wife, Laura. I soon faced another committee, chaired by the dean, investigating the plagiarism allegations against me. This time, I had an attorney and anxiously awaited Laura's testimony. She entered and glared at me with sheer hatred. My attorney silenced me as I tried to speak. Laura claimed I had stolen work from Dr. Jason Fader with Dr. Stevens' help. My attorney couldn't disprove her story. Laura finished testifying without looking at me, and the committee soon terminated me for plagiarism. 2 weeks later, I received divorce papers from Laura. At the deposition, I kept interrupting, trying to speak to her, leading to a contempt citation from the judge. When the hearing finally occurred, the divorce was granted. Laura received 65% of our assets, the house, and alimony for 2 years. As she left the courtroom, Fader comforted her. Then Laura sued me over the TV show rights. I threw down the papers, hopped on my bike, and rode aimlessly. I assumed she won by default since I didn't attend. Everything I worked for was gone. I couldn't find a teaching job or any work in the business world. Out of options, I considered manual labor. In a coffee shop near Las Vegas, I decided to try my luck at a casino. Observing the games, I concluded blackjack had the most favorable odds for a player with a system. I started learning by watching and then playing, realizing not every player was rational. After 6 hours, I had a $3,000 profit. It was a revelation. I got a room at the casino and slept. The next day, I continued playing and learning about comps, courtesy cards, and blackjack strategies. I discovered the importance of moving between casinos to avoid drawing attention. Traveling from casino to casino, I built a nest egg and made alimony payments via postal money orders, begging Laura to call me in each letter. She never did. To avoid carrying large sums of cash, I used coin shops to exchange rare coins after flights. I kept minimal bank accounts, but maintained a visible income source to appease the IRS. Despite my growing funds, I wasn't rich enough to retire. 3 years had passed since my disgrace. The alimony ended, and on the day after Christmas, I woke up next to an escort. I had splurged because I made the mistake of calling Terry on Christmas Eve to wish her a Merry Christmas. "Hi, Terry. Just calling to wish you a Merry Christmas," I said. "Oh, James, it's so good to hear from you. You should come spend Christmas with me." I laughed. "Santa and San just don't mix. How are you, dear? I was worried when I heard the news." Confused, I asked, "What news, Terry?" After a long pause, she said, "Forgive me, James. I thought you were calling to commiserate. Laura has remarried." She sobbed, and I was stunned. I had hoped Laura might forgive me someday. "Married? She's married?" I asked, feeling detached. "Who did she marry?" "It doesn't matter, James. Please let it go," she pleaded, but I insisted. "James, she married Jason Fader. They had a baby last month." I told her I had to go and hung up. Terry called back immediately, but I ignored it and headed to the nearest bar. I ordered the best top-shelf bourbon and asked for an escort. After 3 years of abstaining, I couldn't believe Laura had moved on. I drank bourbon shots until the escort arrived. We agreed on a price, and her looks assured me she'd be worth it. Upstairs, I vented my rage. When I was spent and hungover, I showered and headed to the lobby bar. Normally, I didn't drink and gamble. With a hangover, I knew today would be a day off. I planned to drink, hydrate, take aspirin and vitamins, and rest. I ordered a Bloody Mary at the bar, watching the busy scene around me. Suddenly, my comfort zone was disturbed when someone sat next to me. I glanced over and saw an attractive brunette trying to catch the bartender's eye. She was a blackjack dealer named Kay, who I recognized from the casino. She was competent, kind to rookies, and handled difficult players well. I always enjoyed her rotations and tipped her well, sometimes playing a hand for her to increase her tips. Though we never engaged in small talk, there was a mutual recognition. Dressed in her uniform, dark pants, white shirt, dark vest, and name tag, she smiled briefly at me before turning to the bartender. "Hi, Kay, what can I get you?" he asked. "Hi, Frank. Can I get a 7-Up with no ice?" she replied. The bartender quickly gave Kay her drink, placing it on a cocktail napkin. She added another napkin under it, which seemed odd. She downed the drink in 2 gulps, slid out of the seat, and left, her hand brushing her empty cup against my drink. I found it rude, but excusable, given her looks. As I pushed away the empty cup, I saw a message on the napkin. "They are watching you." My pulse raced, and I stayed calm, draping my arm over the napkins and signaling the bartender to discard the cup. I pretended to clean my glasses and pocketed the napkin. Unsure if I was under surveillance, I left money for my drink and exited without incident. Back in my room, I reread the message and flushed the napkin away. I decided not to gamble, hoping a change in routine might prompt the casino to act if they had any proof against me. I spent the day watching TV, finding nothing interesting, just using it for white noise. The next morning, still undecided, I knew I had to contact Kay away from the casino's eyes and ears. From a mezzanine bar, I observed her shift and saw she took the number 7 bus home. The next day, I rode various buses to check if I was followed, but I saw no one. 20 minutes before her shift ended, I boarded the number 7 bus. When Kay got on, I whispered, "We have to talk." She recognized me, her eyes widening. She got off at the next stop, and I followed her to an IHOP. We sat, and she spoke first. "I wondered if you'd contact me. When I didn't see you, I thought you left town. I have a lot of questions." Who are they, and why are they watching me? I asked. She leaned back. You know who they are and why. The casino suspects you of counting cards. Then why haven't they come for me? I asked. Because they're not sure yet. They want to watch you more. You don't fit the typical card counter profile. You play the cheap tables, don't make big bets when the odds are good, and sometimes you make dumb plays and lose money. The waitress interrupted us and we placed our orders. I used the time to think of more questions. How did they spot me? Who knows? You're just on their radar, she said. How did you find out about me? I asked. They asked me to keep an eye on you. Why warn me? I asked. She hesitated before replying. When I started at the casino, I was saving for college. Then I got pregnant and my boyfriend became abusive. I left him and struggled to make ends meet. A few years ago, I reported a lucky player to my boss and security took him away. I got a raise for it, but then heard rumors about what happened to him. I couldn't have another person on my conscience. The waitress brought our food. Before eating, I asked, "How can I trust you?" She looked me in the eye. "You can't." After eating, we ordered more coffee. "So, I'm on their radar but not in trouble yet?" I asked. "That's right," she confirmed. I slumped in my seat thinking about my bleak future. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I'm out of options. Gambling was my last chance." "Why?" she asked. I explained my life story and scandals. After a pause, she suggested, "Why not switch to poker?" "I don't know how to play," I admitted. She was shocked. "You've been winning at blackjack without knowing poker? Blackjack is simple. Beat the dealer or let them bust. I've never played poker. In poker, you're against other players, not the house. Casinos only care about their cut. They don't mind card counters. Plus, poker uses one deck per hand," she explained. I saw the advantages. "Teach me," I asked impulsively. She looked skeptical. "And then you leave after a few weeks?" "Okay, I'll rent an apartment in your name for a year, paid in advance. I'll also pay you $500 a month for lessons up front. You'll have a safe place, no daycare costs, and I'll tutor your child. That's $6,000 immediately, plus no living expenses for a year." She weighed my offer. Finally, she said, "We have a deal. I arranged to meet Kay the next day after work to move her and her daughter out of the trailer park. At 7 p.m., I drove a U-Haul into the park, feeling uneasy about the covetous stares from the residents. Kay and her daughter, carrying large duffel bags, quickly ran to the truck. They climbed in, and with a panicked look, Kay urged me to hurry. I drove out of the park swiftly. The little girl clung to Kay, terrified of being abandoned. When I asked Kay about their belongings, she said everything else had been stolen over time. This was my first glimpse into their harsh life. After a 30-minute drive, we arrived at the apartment complex I had arranged earlier. I handed Kay the keys, carried the duffel bags, and led them to their new home. The little girl excitedly explored the empty rooms. Kay explained that anything decent they had was stolen, and the rest wasn't worth moving. "Mommy, only one room has furniture," the girl said. Kay introduced her to me and explained that they would stay with me temporarily. The child, wary of me, hid behind her mother. "I thought you'd have more belongings. That's why I rented the truck. Tonight, you and Judy will sleep in my room, and I'll sleep on the living room floor. Tomorrow, we'll shop for furniture," I said. Kay hesitated but agreed. They retired to my room and locked the door behind them. I settled on the floor for a restless night. In the morning, I woke to see Judy staring at me. She quickly ran off. Kay asked if I had slept well. "Like a log," I replied sarcastically, stretching to ease the pain. Judy's stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't stocked the kitchen. "We should get breakfast and then buy furniture and groceries before your shift," I suggested. At the diner, Judy ate like she hadn't in days. Kay, embarrassed, explained their financial struggles. I told her no explanation was needed. Judy smiled when I suggested ordering blueberry muffins to go. At the furniture store, Kay initially chose the cheapest options, but I insisted on something more comfortable. Eventually, she selected a modest, well-built bedroom set for her and Judy. Judy was thrilled at the thought of a queen-size bed and a dresser for her clothes. "Well, what about the living room and kitchen?" I asked, sparking another argument. Kay insisted it wasn't necessary, but I disagreed. I finally told Kay that if she didn't choose, I'd let Judy pick. That brightened Judy, and Kay quickly chose some plain, comfortable furnishings. I got a small discount by paying in cash. After loading the furniture, we headed to Costco for kitchen items, linens, and other essentials. I noticed Judy eyeing the home entertainment section. I suggested Kay and Judy handle the groceries while I took care of the other items. Knowing it was pointless to argue, Kay agreed, and they went off to get another cart. When I caught up with them in the checkout line, Kay asked where I had been. Impulse shopping, I admitted. She looked guilty, but I reassured her, and we pushed the loaded cart to the van. A passerby joked about us buying out the store. I replied, "It takes this much to feed the kid," making Judy laugh. We all worked hard unloading the purchases into the apartment. Kay was surprisingly strong, and we managed to get everything inside. I hesitated as I carried in the home entertainment center I had bought, complete with a 42-inch TV, Xbox, and games. "So that's why you were gone so long," Kay mock glared as Judy danced with excitement. "This is part of the teaching method," I said, bluffing. "When Judy learns her lessons, she'll be rewarded." Judy eagerly examined each game. Kay went to get ready for work. When she returned in her uniform, she saw Judy and me on the floor, sorting parts for the new furniture. I was using it as a math lesson, having Judy count and calculate. Kay, amazed, watched us. "All my life I've wanted to teach," I said. She shook her head, said goodbye, and left for work. For the rest of the day, I assembled furniture and reinforced Judy's math lessons. By the time Kay returned, I had set up her bedroom. I knew she'd rearrange it, but I made the effort. I had hamburgers grilling, so Kay could relax and listen to Judy recount our day. After supper, Kay bathed Judy and retired to her bedroom. I cleaned the kitchen. When Kay returned in an oversized t-shirt and sweatpants, she still looked enticing. "Thank you for fixing my bedroom. I hope you don't mind if I move things around," she laughed. As we sat at the table, I showed her the nanny cams and how to access the feed. "If I thought you'd injure my child, we wouldn't be here. Your offer is a godsend, but if I had any suspicions, we'd stay in that hell," Kay said, her blue eyes clear. "Now you've been teaching Judy all day. It's time for you to learn." She opened a deck of cards and began shuffling. We started with 5-card draw poker. Kay explained the hand rankings from royal flush to high card based on rarity and odds, something I understood. We played until late, with her consistently winning me. Finally, she called it a night, saying she needed sleep. I went to sleep frustrated that I wasn't an instant success at poker, but was comforted by the lingering scent of Kay's perfume on the bed linens. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon and eggs. Stumbling out of my room, I found Judy counting Cheerios at the table, adding and subtracting them before eating. Kay smiled as she finished cooking and set the table. It hit me that this simple domestic life was what I'd been missing. Meals had always been bought and eaten alone in public. A wave of depression hit me, but Kay's smile brightened my mood. I sat down trying to engage with them, but Kay could tell something was off. After breakfast, I kept busy with Judy's math games to avoid questions from Kay. Before leaving for work, she asked if I was okay. "I will be," I lied. Weeks passed in the same routine. Breakfast, lessons with Judy, Kay going to work, more lessons, dinner, Judy's bedtime, and then my poker lessons. We went through various poker games, and although I grasped the rules, I kept losing to Kay. This made me doubt my investment in our deal, but I persevered. One evening, while playing Hold'em, I got a royal flush. Before I could bet, Kay folded. Frustrated, I asked how she knew. She explained that my mannerisms revealed my hand. That marked the start of my advanced poker lessons, focusing on tells, bluffs, and other strategies over the next 2 months. Meanwhile, I continued teaching Judy, who excelled in everything from basic math to early algebra. Kay worried Judy might get bored in school, but I reassured her Judy would excel and enjoy it. On Judy's first day of school orientation, Kay took off work and asked me to join them. Nervously, she hovered around Judy like the other parents. Judy and the other kids were curious and eager to play. Just before class, Judy hugged me, surprising both Kay and me. I encouraged her, and she ran off to join her classmates. Afterward, Kay wiped away tears. I suggested we go to a park instead of staying in the apartment. We walked, ate ice cream, and sat on a bench, quietly enjoying the day. Kay began to share how she and Judy ended up in Las Vegas. She grew up with an booze-dependent father who kicked her out at 18. She moved to Vegas, met Charlie, and got pregnant. While Kay worked at a casino, Charlie stayed home, drinking and eventually cooking meth. He became abusive, and after a police raid, he threatened her from jail. Kay and Judy moved to a rundown trailer park, struggling to survive. As she talked, she started crying about losing Judy. I dropped my ice cream and held her as she cried. Passers-by stared, some thinking I was the cause. I consoled her, reminding her of her strength and resilience. She stiffened and looked at me with tear-stained eyes. "You think I'm beautiful?" Trapped, I replied, "Yes, you're one of the most beautiful, desirable women." I wish I had a chance with you. Why haven't you told me this before? I'm a discredited professor scraping by in casinos. I have no prospects and I'm older than you. You and Judy deserve better. Living with you two is the best part of my life, and now I've jeopardized it by telling you. You've finally gone against your logical brain and taken a big risk. It wasn't the wrong call. We kissed passionately until a police officer interrupted, checking if Kay was all right. Someone had called them due to her emotional outburst. After reassuring the officer, we laughed, feeling a deeper connection. We continued living together, growing more close despite Judy's presence. She noticed the change and wanted us to do more activities together, which we tried to accommodate. My confidence grew as I understood human behavior better. Kay finally declared me tell-free, and I accompanied her to the casino. An hour after she started work, I entered, feeling the urge to play blackjack, but noticed a security guard watching me. I diverted to the poker section, studying the players and their tells. After a week of observing, I discussed my findings with Kay. We agreed the casino was in a wait-and-see mode with me. Kay insisted on our practice sessions, hinting it was her way of earning her keep. We tried to progress from G-rated to R-rated activities when Judy slept, but the physical frustration was intense. I suggested Judy have a sleepover at a friend's house, but Kay said that was a couple of years away. We continued our routine, trying to manage our growing passions. As I watched the poker games, I noticed several types of players. There was the loud bully, the cautious control freak, the quiet pros, the superstitious players, and the charming women who used their looks to win. I could pick up patterns and tells on most players, but a few pros still eluded me. I knew I had to enter a game soon as my resources were dwindling. I decided to play on Friday evening. Kay would be home with Judy, and they could spend Saturday together. I planned to enter a $20 hold'em game, where the blinds were the forced bets by two players in front of the dealer. I went to the casino, rested, and relaxed. My usual escort followed me to the poker table, observing as I got seated. I hoped Kay was right that the casino wouldn't bother me unless I cheated. I bought in my chips and noted my fellow players, wondering who the sucker would be. Saturday afternoon, I stumbled back into the apartment. Kay and Judy were watching a Pixar movie. Kay looked at me with concern. Well? I tossed her an envelope filled with $100 bills. She whooped with joy, hugged me, and kissed me. Judy, oblivious, joined the hug. I told Judy she could pick the restaurant for dinner, and we ended up at Chuck E. Cheese's. After we ordered, Judy ran off to play, and Kay asked about my game. It went smoothly. You prepared me so well that I saw the game unfold like a chess match. I wasn't the big winner, but I did well. A pro recognized my skill, and we stayed out of each other's way. Security didn't hassle me. I cashed out and came home. Kay nuzzled up to me. Half the money in the envelope is yours, I said. You went above and beyond teaching me. We're partners now. Kay teared up, but didn't get a chance to respond before the food and Judy arrived. I felt her foot sliding up and down my leg under the table. To keep my gambling from disrupting our lives, Kay and I set ground rules. I could only play when Judy was occupied or with Kay. I'd buy in with a set amount, wouldn't chase losses, and any profits would go into a joint account. We also committed to a weekly family activity. Our physical relationship intensified, though we were cautious with Judy in the apartment. I signed up for a satellite tournament and won $25,000 and an entry ticket to the World Series of Poker. We celebrated with an Italian meal, this time chosen by Kay. Back at the apartment, Judy went to bed and Kay and I began our usual cuddling on the couch. She then announced she wanted to play poker. Kay, you've got to be kidding me. You've got me all revved up and now you want to play cards? I said, incredulous. She lingered, kissing me, then walked over to the kitchen table and got the deck of cards. As she began shuffling, a nagging thought returned to me. She noticed. What's wrong, James? Something's bugging you every time I shuffle a deck of cards. Well, this will keep your mind off that. We're going to play strip poker, she said matter-of-factly, continuing to shuffle. The only sound was the riffling of cards. She dealt and announced she was all in. I called her bet with a deuce and 3, one of the worst hands. She stood up, stripped, and revealed her perfect body. Her eyes showed anticipation and vulnerability. I undressed, and she seemed satisfied with what she saw. We kissed and moved to my bedroom. My efforts were rewarded with her gasps and moans of satisfaction. Oh God, James, this is wonderful, she crooned, holding my hair tight. I continued to tease her until she climaxed, muffling her screams with a pillow to avoid waking Judy. James, forgive me if I don't do this right. The only person I ever did this with was Charlie. I reassured her, and we continued, miraculously ready for another round. We both exploded into bliss. Afterward, we cuddled, but Kay had to go to bed with Judy as morning was approaching. Despite my frustration, I knew this was the beginning of a deeper relationship. Each evening became an exploration of each other's desires, and we rarely went to sleep frustrated. We thought we were keeping our relationship a secret from Judy, but one night during a thunderstorm, she asked to join us in bed. I thanked God we were still clothed. We comforted her, and in the morning, we all woke up together. At breakfast, Judy revealed she had known for weeks we were sleeping together. She just didn't understand why her mom couldn't stay in one bed all night. Her comment set us off laughing. Preparing for the World Series of Poker, I was nervous about media attention. Fortunately, ESPN focused on established stars, and I stayed under the radar. On my first hand, I flopped pocket aces. I decided to call the bet to build the pot. The flop came with the remaining 2 aces and a king of clubs, giving me 4 of a kind. Several players went all in, and I followed, knowing the cameras were now on us. I sat stoically as the remaining players folded, then revealed our hands. As I expected, the first bettor had nothing. The second had a pair of 8s, and the fourth had a pair of kings. A full house, but not good enough. The final 2 cards were anticlimactic. I quadrupled my stake on the first hand, gaining the power to dictate play at the table. I kept winning pots, with everyone folding to avoid risking their chips. By the end of the day, I was among the chip leaders. Exhausted, I returned to the apartment where Kay was excited by my news. She fed me, massaged me, and put me to bed. On the second day, I was moved to another table, still in the lead. I threw my weight around, frustrating the other players, and continued to grow my stack. By the end of another day, I heard muttered curses as I left. As I continued to dominate, I drew attention. An associate producer wanted an interview. I ignored the request, but was reminded of my contractual obligation. The interview was painful. I was aloof and uncooperative, leaving the interviewer defenseless. I overheard a producer asking why I was so difficult. At the apartment, I warned Kay that trouble was brewing. She told me to focus on my cards. Then the media report came out, labeling me a disgraced professor leading the World Series of Poker. My past scandals were now national news. Players used this to get under my skin, but I kept winning. Things worsened when a news crew ambushed Kay and Judy on their way to school, bombarding Kay with questions until she took Judy back inside. They didn't tell me to keep me focused. Despite the stress, we reached the point where every remaining player would get a cash prize. I was thrilled, but unaware of the morning's events. Kay and Judy were under immense stress. Kay was questioned at work about our relationship, and Judy faced taunts at school. They protected me while I quietly climbed the ranks. Eventually, we reached the final table. The tournament paused for more TV coverage. I agreed to a statement about my past without answering questions. On camera, I recounted my life factually, apologizing for my previous interview and explaining my desire to protect Kay and Judy. Choking up, I ended with a plea to leave them alone. I returned to the apartment where we began to decompress from the stress. Days passed and we all recovered, knowing the payday would be substantial. Meanwhile, my interview gained traction, aired by multiple TV stations. An enterprising reporter tracked down Terry Stevens, who corroborated my story. Then they searched for my 3 accusers, but I wouldn't learn about that until later. All I wanted was to spend time with Kay and Judy. Before the hiatus ended, I suggested a trip to the Grand Canyon. We packed a picnic and spent a peaceful day there. As we approached the apartment, Judy ran inside first. While Kay and I gathered things from the car, I sensed something was off. How did Judy get in the house? Before it registered, I heard her scream. Kay rushed in, screaming and struggling with a tall, unkempt man holding Judy and a large hunting knife. "God damn it, cow, I'll eliminate her if you don't get off me," he roared. Hearing the threat, Kay backed off, begging for Judy's life. "Please, Charlie, please don't hurt Judy," she sobbed. "I want the money your boyfriend won at the tournament. Give me all the money and you and this little crap will live. I'm still gonna mark you, but you'll live." Kay tried to explain that the huge stacks of chips were just for show and that no one had received them yet. But Charlie, high on meth, wasn't listening. He had made parole, found out Kay and Judy had disappeared, and then saw them on TV. He broke into the apartment, ransacked it for money, and was now threatening them. Kay's appeals only agitated him more. I had to divert his attention. "Hey, Charlie, I'm the one you need to deal with. I'll give you everything I've got if you don't hurt Judy. Let her go and we can make a deal." Recognizing me, Charlie sneered. "Yeah, I know you. You're the sorry son of a cow who took this cow away from me. You want her? You're gonna have to pay. Judy tried to break free, and he brandished the knife near her throat. I lunged and grabbed his knife hand, forcing him to release Judy. She ran to Kay as I yelled, "Run!" and turned my attention to Charlie. We struggled, but he was stronger, built up from prison exercises. The knife slashed me and I retreated, trying to buy time for Kay and Judy to escape. Bleeding from multiple wounds, I continued to guard the door. Charlie enjoyed maiming me, but as I weakened, he sensed the need to escape. He rushed me and we both went down. I tried to keep the knife away, but he used his free hand to pummel my face. I was losing, just as I had failed all my life. My vision blurred and I knew I was about to lose everything. My last sight was Charlie's triumphant face as he prepared to finish me. "Don't hurt my daddy!" Judy yelled. The words pained me more than any injury as I felt a painful electrical shock and everything faded to black. The annoying beep brought me around. My fuzzy brain struggled to locate the source. When I opened my eyes and saw white ceiling tiles, I heard someone say, "He's coming around." Activity buzzed around me, and then I knew Kay was there. I felt her warm, soft hand gripping mine as she cried over me. I tried to talk, but she just shook her head and smiled. Then, everything faded again. When I woke up again, Kay was still there, holding my hand. I was in intensive care. Kay reassured me that I had lost a lot of blood and needed stitches, but I'd be okay. The police had tasered us both before Charlie could finish me off. I would be moved to a regular room soon. I tried to talk but couldn't, and I drifted back to sleep. When I woke up again, I was in a different room, with Kay still by my side despite her exhaustion. "You need to go home and rest," I told her. She refused, saying she and Judy were fine up here. The mention of Judy reminded me of her cries, and pain crossed my face. The last thing I heard was Judy begging me not to hurt her daddy. I thought we were a family, and losing that was the worst part, I said sadly. "Listen," Kay said sharply. "We are a family. Judy was crying for you. And you know how I know? You told me to go home. Not to the apartment, but to our home. Anywhere we are together is home." Before I could respond, Judy jumped on the bed, crying, "Daddy, Daddy!" I began bawling as I held her. The three of us cried together while the nurses gave us a moment. Once we calmed down, Kay updated me. Charlie's actions were caught on our nanny cams, ensuring a long prison sentence. The video was released nationally. The World Series of Poker had contacted Kay to ask if I could continue. She left the decision to me. "What do you think, Kay? Should I continue or give up? Tell me what you want." Kay smiled. "I'm just happy you asked. This is your decision. Your family is behind you 100%. That's how I found myself at the final table, weathered but determined. I played low-key and watched others battle. The blinds increased, but I bided my time. One player, a classic bully, taunted and insulted everyone, including me, using my history to get under my skin. The World Series would penalize him for misuse, but stopping him would show he got to me. I bore it in silence. When we finally clashed, he mentioned my past, and I remained calm. Losing the hand, I watched him celebrate obnoxiously. Play continued, and I managed to hang on by taking the blinds occasionally. Eventually, it was just three of us, the bully, me, and a guy with a short stack who soon went all in and lost. Then it was just me and the bully. Las Vegas showgirls carried trays of $100 stacks, creating a mountain of chips for a dramatic visual, despite the impracticality. Now the battle was one-on-one, and the bully unleashed every insult he could. He crossed the line, calling Kay a meth-head cow, and saw it hurt me. I told him he could say anything about me but to leave my family out of it. He sneered. I tried to think of something else, and the Hodge conjecture popped into my head, distracting me. Despite the bully's taunts, I continued to play well. When I took half his chips with a full house, I sarcastically asked if he was going to do a victory dance. Enraged, he insulted Kay again, and I almost lunged at him, causing a pause in the game. I looked at Kay and Judy in the audience, both upset. When the game resumed, I knew the bully had achieved his goal. I was on tilt. I tried to calm down by thinking of Kay shuffling cards when we played strip poker. The shuffle reminded me of equations in the Hodge conjecture. My mind raced with calculations, and I became oblivious to the game. I was shaken back to reality, realizing I hadn't looked at my cards, and 5 million chips were in the pot. I looked at Kay and yelled, "The conjecture!" She seemed to understand its significance. I re-raised without looking at my cards, flustering the bully. When the flop came, I went all in without knowing my cards. I walked over to Kay, holding her as the uproar continued. The bully called the bet, and I hit a jack-high flush against his straight. Luck was on my side. Pandemonium erupted, and I was eventually brought back for the winner's presentation. The bullies stormed out, and I gave a few remarks, refusing the gaudy champion's bracelet in favor of a paper bracelet Judy made for me. We celebrated in a penthouse, courtesy of the casino. When we settled in, Kay made everything worthwhile. Afterward, I requested legal pads, pens, and a laptop to start working. 3 months later, an article titled The Solution to Hodge's Conjecture by the Vronsky Shift, authored by Dr. Ben Stevens and Dr. James Reed, caused a stir in the math world. Terry Stevens and I were awarded $1 million for solving the conjecture. CBS's 60 Minutes featured me as a bad boy math genius. They tracked down Karen Hudgens and my other accusers of physical misconduct. One cracked and the others recanted, revealing that Jason Fader and the dean had coerced them. Jason had traded grades for lovemaking, videotaped the acts, and blackmailed the girls. Karen and the others were forced to accuse me to get their videos back. 60 Minutes aired a snippet showing Jason and the dean with the girls, followed by Karen tearfully begging for my forgiveness. The university's Board of Trustees announced an investigation, and the segment ended with the iconic ticking watch. As soon as the show ended, the phone rang off the hook. I monitored caller IDs to avoid people I didn't want to talk to, mainly old friends and colleagues who had abandoned me and now wanted to assure me they always knew I was innocent. Then my parents called. Though they had been quick to judge, I decided to hear them out. The only person I was happy to hear from was Terry Stevens. We cried together, knowing vindication had finally come, though at a great cost. The university's Board of Trustees reached out, inviting me to return. I flew back with Kay and Judy, fielding various offers. I told them I would discuss it with Kay and get back to them. In the VIP lounge at the airport, I saw Laura walking toward me. Despite the years, she was still beautiful. "Hello, Reed," she said, and her voice made my knees weak. I managed to croak out, "Hello, Laura." I had so many ways to start this conversation, but now my mind is blank. I thought about crashing the trustees' party, but since the dean, Jason, and I are persona non grata, I thought better of it. We've been unofficially notified we'll be terminated. Girls are coming forward about Jason's scheme, some from during my marriage. I left him. I'm going back home with my son to start over. I know I don't deserve it, but I want you to consider us. We were perfect together for so many years. I loved you so much, but when I heard that awful testimony, it clouded my judgment. I lashed out to hurt you. You'd love my son. If you met him, you'd see a beautiful little boy. If it's not too late, would you consider us? If not, I understand. I'd like your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking. I stood there, stunned. Laura, seeing you brings back happy memories. In a perfect world, we'd start over. She brightened up. But we're not in a perfect world. Kay might be an alley cat compared to you, but she's my alley cat. She'd stand by me no matter what. Our relationship is unbreakable. We'll love each other for the next 40 or 50 years until one of us dies. Her face fell as I continued. I can forgive you for what you did to me because it led me to Kay, but I can't forgive you for how you treated Ben. He loved you like a daughter, and you abandoned him. You didn't attend his service or support Terry. You participated in academic dishonesty against him. So no, I can't forgive you. I hope you and your son find happiness, but not with my blessing. Laura began to cry. A flight attendant told me my companion, Miss Vronsky, and our daughter had already boarded the plane. Laura recognized Kay's maiden name from my paper. I turned and walked toward the Gulfstream jet, a perk from the trustees' party. Soon I was cruising at 30,000 feet with Judy in my lap, busy with her coloring book. I closed my eyes, trying to let go of the residual pain. With closure from Laura, I felt a nudge and opened my eyes to see Judy wanting my attention. I looked at her algebra scribbles and told her they were correct. She smiled and returned to her book. Kay, amused, was shopping for a baby bassinet on her laptop. Closing my eyes again, I reflected on how, despite the imperfect world, finding your soulmate makes every play worthwhile. Then I felt another nudge from my little munchkin. I carefully navigated the evening traffic across London toward the Marriott Hotel. My mind was racing with thoughts of the impending situation and its consequences. No matter what happened tonight, the lives of at least 3 people would be forever changed. My name is Sal, short for Salvatore, of Italian descent. My parents moved to the UK in the late 1960s and started an Italian restaurant, the cornerstone of our close-knit family. Although we no longer live together, family gatherings are always crowded, and missing one means enduring my grandmother's disapproving stares. I married Connie 7 years ago. Despite a fun relationship, it lacked the foundation for the long term. My grandmother never liked Connie, always watching her with distrust and warning me to be cautious. Her words echoed in my mind as I drove through London's dense traffic. A month ago, I discovered Connie was cheating on me for the past 6 months. I found out when she carelessly left a hotel pen in her purse. This tiny mistake led me to uncover her infidelity. I decided to investigate discreetly. We often met with friends Carlo and Joanna and Phil and Terry at a cozy restaurant run by my cousin. Carlo, like an older brother to me, had a colorful past but was always kind and protective. His wife Joanna was feisty and the only person he feared. Our evenings were usually enjoyable. But tonight, everything felt different as I headed toward the hotel, knowing the truth about Connie and bracing for the fallout. I met Phil at work, and we hit it off. We were the same age with similar outlooks on life. We played golf together occasionally and socialized with his wife Terry at the golf club. Terry and Connie got along well, often spending days shopping together. Phil was always warm and friendly, but Terry seemed aloof at times, especially lately. Then she'd snap out of it and rejoin the group. I mentioned it to Connie, but she dismissed it as woman problems. One evening, we were sipping cocktails in the lounge when Carlo and Joanna arrived. We greeted each other warmly, and the waiter brought fresh drinks. Connie was always impressed with the excellent service we received. My cousin had our usual corner table ready, secluded but facing the door, as Carlo always insisted. We didn't question it. "Why are Phil and Terry coming?" Joanna asked Connie. "I spoke to her earlier. They're definitely coming, but they might be a little late since Phil isn't home yet." Carlo glanced at the women, then at me, and shook his head slightly. I decided to ask him about it later. Phil and Terry arrived looking flushed, and Carlo gave them a long, impassive stare. Something was off. We sat down and chatted about work and family. After lunch, we moved to the lounge. The girls danced while we sipped cocktails and talked sports. When the music slowed, we joined them on the dance floor. Connie pressed against me, hinting at more to come later. Carlo and Joanna returned to the table, but Phil and Terry seemed stiff. "Is everything okay with those two?" I whispered to Connie. "Yeah, I guess so." But Terry didn't say anything. Connie tried to distract me as we walked back to the table. Carlo smiled at me, and Joanna giggled. Phil and Terry returned, and Terry quickly went to the bathroom, leading the other women to follow. "Everything all right, Phil?" Carlo asked coolly. "Yeah, sure, no problem." But his body language said otherwise. When the women returned, Terry's body language gave her away. Connie's glance confirmed my suspicions. We tried to ignore the tension. Carlo nudged me and winked. He knew something. After a few more dances, my cousin called a cab. I noticed Connie and Phil having an animated conversation. Another oddity of the evening. "So, what's up with Phil and Terry?" I asked Connie bluntly. "Nothing, they're fine." She smiled and looked out the window. I sensed something was wrong, but decided to talk to Carlo the next morning. That night, Connie was unusually passionate, declaring her love for me. "I love you too, baby. Don't ever forget that. You're my wife. No one will take you away from me, and I'll never give you a reason to." I hugged her tightly and kissed her. As we fell asleep, I lay staring at the ceiling, remembering the strange events of the evening. I should call Carlo first thing in the morning. Connie left early for the gym. I drank glass after glass of orange juice to clear my head. I Googled the hotel name from the pen in her purse. It was across London, posh with easy parking. I noted the contact info, but found no online booking history. The history had been wiped clean. Paranoia set in, and I called Carlo. "Carlo, it's Sal. What's going on with Phil and Terry? Should I be worried?" "It seems like you know something," I said, concern evident in my voice. "Sal, meet me at my brother's bar mid-afternoon. I'll tell you everything in person, not over the phone," Carlo responded, his tone serious. "Of course, I'll be there," I agreed quickly. "And come alone, okay?" he added, making the situation seem even more dire. "Yes, I understand," I replied, feeling a knot form in my stomach. The call ended, leaving me with a sense of impending doom. I sat staring at the phone, anxiety churning in my stomach. An hour later, Connie walked in, looking refreshed from her workout. "Good workout?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, it was great. I needed that," she said, tossing her purse and gym bag aside. "I'm going to see Carlo. He wants to talk about something, but it won't take long. I informed her, attempting to mask my nervousness. "What does he want, Sal? He still creeps me out," she replied, a hint of distrust in her voice. "He's a good guy, but don't underestimate him. I won't be long, okay?" I assured her, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. Connie gave me a look I couldn't read. I drove slowly to Carlo's brother's bar, a trendy, inconspicuous place. Carlo opened the door, checking to see if I was followed. "Okay, Carlo, what's going on?" "Your call worried me and I don't know what to think," I said as soon as I saw him. He looked me in the eye and said, "Follow me." We went to an office in the back. He closed the door and we sat down. "Sal, you're like family to me. I promised your father I'd always take care of you. What I'm going to tell you will hurt, but you need to hear it," Carlo began, his eyes showing pain. My heart raced, sensing it had to do with my wife. Carlo pulled a large envelope from the desk and handed it to me. I knew it held something that would change my life. "Is it bad?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his eyes full of sympathy. "Sal, I'm here for you, okay?" he said, lifting his hand. I took the envelope and opened it. Inside were photos, my wife with another man in a cheap hotel and on our bed. Tears blurred my vision as I looked at Carlo. "How did you find out? Who is he?" I demanded, shocked and angry. "Sal, a few weeks ago I heard rumors about Connie. I didn't have proof until recently. A friend saw her with this man in South London. They were too close for comfort, and he recognized her," Carlo explained. "And who is Tony Drew?" I asked, trying to process the information. "He's Phil's brother. You must know him," Carlo replied. I was stunned as the pieces fell into place. Phil, Connie, Terry. "I found a pen from a London hotel. Is it there?" I asked, hoping for more details. "Yeah. Sal, I'm sorry, but my guy followed them last week while you were out of town. Their first meeting happened when you weren't home," Carlo continued. I clenched my fists tightly. "I'm going to eliminate that cretin," I growled, anger boiling over. "Easy, Sal, it's not worth it. Divorce her and let me deal with him," Carlo advised. "No, Carlo, I have to handle it myself. He needs to know it was me. Do you know where he lives and works?" I insisted, determined. "All the info is in the envelope. Don't do anything rash. We need to plan this carefully. He's divorced, no kids, but he likes married women. He'll regret getting involved with your wife," Carlo said, his eyes turning cold. "What's your plan?" I asked, trying to calm down. He poured me a whiskey. "How well do you get along with Phil? He seemed off in the restaurant with Terry and your wife. I think he knows what's going on. Can you still call him a friend?" Carlo inquired. I wondered if his wife was involved too. Carlo continued. "We need to act soon, but first see a lawyer. Do you want to try to make up with her? If it was an isolated incident, maybe, but seeing this, I can't forgive or forget." "I need to think about this, Carlo. I want them both to suffer," I said, my mind swirling with thoughts of revenge. He handed me a business card. "Divorce lawyer. He's ruthless. I've briefed him on your situation. Call him and he'll take care of it. Plus, he's a cousin." He laughed and I managed to smile. We planned our next steps for an hour. I called Cousin Carlo and he sprang into action. We agreed to wait until everything was ready. I needed to find out how involved Phil and Terry were. I drove home, my mind racing. When I arrived, the house was silent. Connie was gone. A note on the kitchen table read, "I'll see Terry later. Love you." I crumpled it and threw it away. I called Carlo. "She's gone to Terry's, but I know she's with Phil. Our guy is watching her," Carlo informed me over the phone. "Okay, so where's Terry then? Let me know if anything comes up," I responded. 3 hours later, Connie came home. "Hey, love, how was your day?" I asked as she stormed in, kissed my cheek, and headed for the kitchen. "It was fine. Carlo and I are working on a plan," she replied, waiting for more details. I didn't offer any. "It's a personal matter with a cousin. He thinks his wife is cheating and needs advice," I explained, smiling as I noticed her trying to hide a casual smile. "I'm sure it'll work out," she said, looking away, a bit upset. The rest of the weekend dragged on. I couldn't bring myself to be physically engaged with her, haunted by the images Carlo had shown me of her and Tony. She was a better liar and actress than I ever imagined. On Sunday night, she came over, clearly wanting to have some fun. "Sal, I need us to spend this night together. I know you've been busy, but I need you now, please," she whimpered. We made love, but afterward she looked shocked. "What's wrong, Sal? We've never done this before," she said. "I just wanted to make sure you were mine. I love you, Connie, and I don't want to lose you," I replied, my heart heavy. "You won't lose me, silly," she said with a smile. But her words tore at my heart. The image of her with Tony was seared into my mind. We lay quietly, each with our thoughts. I slipped out of bed when she fell asleep and went downstairs. I poured a large glass of JD and checked the computer. A message from Carlo appeared. "All the wheels are turning here just as we discussed," he had written. Okay, I thought. All I need to do now is arrange a sleepover for Wednesday. I sent him a text back. Okay. An hour later, I crawled back into bed but couldn't sleep. I finally dozed off, getting only a few hours of restless sleep. In the morning, I showered and went downstairs. Connie greeted me with a smile, breakfast, coffee, and toast. She moved cautiously, noticing my gaze. "You were a little wild last night, lover. I don't think I'll be ready for another round for a few days," she said, kissing me again. "It's okay," I smiled through a coughing fit. She sipped her coffee. "I need to go to Leeds on Wednesday. Do you mind?" she asked. "Just for one night?" I inquired. "Yes, but I won't be back until late Thursday," she explained. "Does this have something to do with Carlo?" she asked. "Yes, it's about that cousin I mentioned. He might need some support," I lied smoothly. "Carlo gives me the creeps. I'm not sure what kind of support he could offer," she said with a shiver. "You'd be surprised, but you don't want to be on his bad side," I warned. Her face went pale, but I could see she was still planning something. I looked at my watch and got up to leave. "I gotta go, honey. Be a good girl while I'm gone," I said, kissing her head and leaving. I met the lawyer and spent an hour going over options and signing papers. He confirmed everything would be ready by Wednesday afternoon. I transferred all the money from our savings to a new account in my name and sent a large sum to Carlo. I emptied our safe deposit box and opened a new account at another bank. I stopped her allowance, knowing she'd be in trouble by the end of the month. Satisfied, I went to my office and handled my routine business. My secretary, Sadie, was a great help, and I knew she could manage things without me. I caught her concerned gaze on me. I sighed and turned to face her. I had known her for almost 5 years, and she had always been professional and fiercely loyal. She had been polite with Connie, but there was some tension. I was sure Connie had mentioned her attitude, but I always brushed it off. Looking at her concerned face and piercing blue eyes, I knew I had to say something. My insides were churning, and she could tell. I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts and control my emotions. "Sadie, there might be interruptions this week. If I'm not around, you know how to keep things running, okay?" I said. "Yes, boss. Anything I can help with?" she asked, sensing my distress. "Connie's playing me," I confessed, unable to hold it in any longer. "You're joking! Oh my God, Sal, this is awful! Are you sure?" she exclaimed, eyes wide with shock. I nodded slowly. She saw my tears and closed the door. She hugged me tightly. Standing next to her, I felt a love I was missing at home. I sobbed for the first time since finding out, and she held me until I pulled myself together. She took my face in her hands and looked into my eyes. "Sal, you're a good person. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." "What are you going to do?" Sadie asked, her voice filled with concern and support. "I'm going to get a divorce and deal with that cretin," I said, my resolve hardening. "I understand, but be careful, Sal. Don't do anything stupid," she cautioned. Sadie was worth her weight in gold. She handled everything perfectly, making her husband a lucky man. At home, Connie and I were watching TV when the phone rang. She answered it in the hallway, talking quietly. After 5 minutes, she returned. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Oh, nothing. Just Terry talking about fighting with Phil again. It's driving me crazy," she replied. "Are they in big trouble?" "Phil never mentioned it," I said, watching her face for clues. "I think it's nothing. They'll figure it out," she responded, trying to sound nonchalant. "Is that what was going on in the restaurant?" I asked. Connie looked nervous. She didn't know I had noticed something between them. "Yeah, they had a fight before going out," she admitted. "Is that what you were doing with Phil?" I pressed. She flinched. "Terry asked me to talk to Phil," she explained. "So what was that about, Connie? Maybe I can help," I suggested. "It's all right, Sal. I'm sure they've sorted it out by now," she said dismissively. "Good. I don't like the thought of a friend's marriage in trouble. He's not cheating, is he?" I probed further. No, nothing like that," she replied, her face flushing. "So this is Terry playing a prank on himself?" I asked skeptically. "Look, Sal, I don't know. Let's mind our own business," she snorted. "I think so too. But I might mention it to Phil when I see him," I said, ending the conversation as I looked at the TV again. Her eyes narrowed. A few minutes later, I asked casually, "So, if neither of them are cheating, and Terry asked you to talk to Phil, what was that about?" "Sal, leave him alone," she snapped, getting up and running out of the room. I sat back, realizing I had gotten under her skin. Tomorrow, I would drop in on Phil and Terry and disturb them a little. The next day, Tuesday, I got up early and was out the door as Connie came downstairs. I kissed her on the cheek. "I can't stop, my love. I need to get moving. Love you," I said. Connie watched in bewilderment as I disappeared, hearing my car speed off. She poured herself a cup of coffee, thinking about Tony. Everything had been fine until last week. She met Tony a few months ago when she was out with Terry. They were in a club with friends when he walked in. Seeing his sister-in-law, he approached and offered them all a drink. The girls smiled at the handsome guy. Terry noticed Tony and Connie looking into each other's eyes, and something flashed between them. "Stay away from Tony. He's a piece of crap. He even hit on me. He'll go after anyone, especially the married ones," Terry warned. "Don't worry, Terry. I have my own Sal, but he's smooth and good-looking. Weren't you tempted?" Connie asked. Terry shook her head. "One word, don't," Terry advised, sensing something behind her friend's eyes she didn't like. The rest of the evening was uneventful, but Tony gave Connie his number. Over the next few days, Tony called her, flirting and chatting. By the next party, Connie knew Tony would be there. They danced, and Tony seduced her with flattery and touches. Terry grabbed Connie's elbow, and she realized she had spent the entire evening with Tony. Terry reprimanded her, but Connie brushed it off, claiming nothing bad happened. Tony was confident he would get Connie sooner or later. In the following weeks, their calls and flirting intensified. When Terry canceled a night out, Tony convinced Connie to meet him alone. She agreed quickly, dressed as usual but felt different. They had a hot evening and Tony drove her to the Marriott. She panicked when she saw the time, hurried to get dressed, and asked Tony to take her home. She texted Sal, saying she was waiting for a cab. That night scared her, but Sal was asleep when she got home. She hoped everything would be fine by morning. For the next few weeks, Connie continued seeing Tony, both during nights out and during the day. During Sal's trip, she spent the night with Tony at the hotel. Terry guessed what Connie was up to and warned her to stop before getting caught. She fought with her husband, Phil, and asked him to press Tony to stop. Tony was dismissive, and Phil was torn between loyalty to his brother and Sal. Connie lashed out when Phil asked her to stop seeing Tony. The longer it went on, the harder it was to end it without causing serious problems. Connie knew it had to be over soon, but found the risk attractive. She decided tomorrow would be the last time, but she still had to convince Tony. By the time I walked in the door, it was late. I had been liquidating time all day, and the plans were set. The paperwork from the lawyer was in my car, and the official packet would be delivered by registered mail. Feeling tense, I poured a large drink of JD. Connie watched me as I took a big sip and poured another. I was distraught, and I could tell Connie was too. "Are you okay, Sal?" she asked. I took another sip of my JD before turning to face her. She looked scared and worried. "Just a rough day, love. I need a shower before I get ready to talk to Carlo tomorrow." I walked past her and went upstairs without kissing her. She didn't like the tense atmosphere and wondered what I meant by getting ready for tomorrow. Under the hot shower, tears streamed down my face. My marriage, my wife, my future, all messed up. After 30 minutes, I felt no better. My heart was breaking. I dried off, got dressed, and headed downstairs. Connie noticed my game face and seemed to relax a bit. "What's for dinner?" I asked casually. "Let's order something. I don't feel like cooking." "Chinese okay?" "Yeah, that sounds nice." While we waited for the food, we sat in the living room, avoiding confrontation. Dinner was quiet, almost tense. "What time do you have to go in the morning?" she asked casually. "Around 9. We have an 11 o'clock flight, so no rush. It'll be good to finally meet Cousin Carlo." It was nearly 10 p.m., and she glanced at her watch. "I need to turn in. Long day tomorrow." I drained my glass, set it down, and looked at her. There was a flicker of sadness in her eyes. She closed the door between us. "I've always loved you, Connie," I said, hugging her tightly. She felt my sadness and guilt. Tomorrow it would all be over, she thought, and then she could make it up to me. I was thinking the same thing. I woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee, a scent that always brought back memories of my grandmother's house. Connie handed me a large mug, and I kissed her cheek before taking a sip. We ate in silence, both avoiding each other's gaze. The tension was palpable. I glanced at my watch. "I have to go now. I need to pick up Carlo." I stood, set my cup down, and took a deep breath to suppress a sob. Connie was tense and trying to remain calm. She must know that I know. "Have a safe trip and come back soon, Sal," she said, as I gave her a polite kiss on the forehead. I grabbed my overnight bag, started the car, and drove away without looking back, tears brimming in my eyes. After a few minutes, Connie picked up the phone. "He's gone. Are you ready for tonight?" "Oh yeah, baby, definitely. Phil's been getting on my nerves, but I told him to back off." "Well, that won't stop us. Room 415, same as before. I'll see you at 8, okay?" "Okay, got it. I'll call you later." They hung up, and the man smiled, typing a message with the details of their date. Carlo saw the message and looked grimly at me. "Are you sure you want to do this, Sal? You know how this will end," Carlo said, concerned. "Carlo, I love that woman in a way I never will again. I gave her everything, and I can't let that go. I have to make her realize what she's done and make her pay, just like her lover. I have to do it. Do you understand?" Carlo saw the pain in Sal's eyes and felt it in his words. He pulled a revolver from his desk and placed it in front of Sal. "We'll make him pay. You need the weapon to make your point," Carlo said. Sal nodded, staring at the weapon. Carlo added a handful of shell casings to the table. "Load it, Sal. Make it real in your mind," Carlo urged. Sal picked up the weapon, memories flooding back. He loaded it with ease and set it down. "What's next, Sal?" Carlo asked. Sal replied, "Let's eat, and I'll tell you everything. I might call Terry and Phil later to see what they know and why they didn't tell me." "I'd leave it alone," Carlo advised. "If you get caught now, you'll give the police motive. There will be time later." They walked to a bar where Carlo introduced Sal to his brother, Alfredo. "Nice to meet you, Sal," Alfredo said, shaking his hand. They chatted until a waitress brought their food. She smiled at Sal and introduced herself as Alicia, Carlo's niece. "Nice to meet you, Sal. My uncle's told me a lot about you," she said. "Alfredo, it's a pleasure to meet your family. Family is everything," Sal said. Lunch passed leisurely. Despite the serious conversation, Sal felt calm and safe. His phone rang around 3 in the afternoon. It was Connie. "Hi, Connie. How are you?" Sal asked. "Just checking on you. How's Carlo?" she inquired. "We're fine, having a late lunch. What are your plans for tonight?" Sal asked, testing her. "I'm seeing Terry. Everything's fine," she lied smoothly. "Good. Say hi to Terry. Love you," Sal replied, keeping his voice steady. "Love you too. Bye, baby," Connie said before hanging up. When Sal hung up, Carlo saw both pain and anger in his eyes. "Okay, Sal?" Carlo asked, concerned. "Yeah, we're ready," Sal replied, his voice cold. They toasted and finished their drinks. "Let's meet the guys," Carlo said, leading the way. They found 4 men in the private quarters. Carlo introduced them as his trusted friends. "These guys won't let you down," Carlo assured Sal. Sal noticed their steely eyes and felt a shiver. "Still want this?" Sal asked Carlo coldly. "Yes, I need it," Carlo confirmed. "Is everything ready?" Sal asked the men. "Everything checked out. Cars, van access, evacuation routes. We're ready for the next 30 minutes, one of the men replied. The plan was reviewed until everyone was confident it was ready. I felt their eyes on me as I paced, tense and angry. The thought of Connie meeting Tony was gut-wrenching. I wanted to hit something. Carlo stepped in front of me and hugged me. "Easy, Sal. We'll hit the road soon. It'll get easier," he reassured me. Frustration, anger, and betrayal brought tears to my eyes. Carlo stayed by my side, and I felt the men's support. For the next hour, they talked to me, preparing me for my part. A phone call interrupted us. Carlo answered. "Yeah," he said. Everyone listened intently. "Okay, we'll start moving in 5 minutes." It was already 8 p.m. The men left to bring the van closer. Carlo saw my anxiety. "Sal, last chance. You don't have to do this," he offered. "I need to teach him a lesson he'll never forget," I insisted. "Good man," Carlo said, clapping my shoulder as we left and got into the prepared Mercedes. We parked about 200 yards from the hotel. Around 9 p.m., Carlo received a text. "They've arrived," he read out loud. My heart ached. Carlo kept his hand on my shoulder to ground me. "Let's stick to the plan, Sal," he reminded me. I nodded. We had to wait another hour. Another text came. "The guys are here and in place." Carlo smiled nervously. We needed to get in and out discreetly. We discussed the plan again, and Carlo reminded me to stay calm. "We don't want a riot because of those two, okay?" His cold eyes met mine. I knew not to mess this up. "All right, Carlo, I won't shoot him in bed. I'm not that stupid," I smirked. He smacked my head lightly. "Don't lie to me, Sal. This is serious. Get a grip," he scolded. We sat in silence until another message popped up. "We're in. Exit secured." Carlo checked the time. It was almost time. His heart and breathing quickened. He pulled brass knuckles from the glove compartment and opened the car door. "Okay, let's go," he said, and we moved towards the hotel with grim determination. I followed Carlo into the hotel lobby. We walked straight to the elevators, trying to act casual but avoiding eye contact. I was tense. When the elevator arrived, we stepped aside for a couple to exit, then got in. We rode up silently to the 4th floor. My heart raced as we reached room 415. I knew my wife was inside with another man. 4 guys in hotel uniforms appeared with a laundry cart. They wore wool hats and had a taser. Carlo pointed out the neutralized security cameras, giving us 5 minutes. One guy used a key card to unlock the door. We moved quickly down the hallway to the bedroom. I saw my wife's lingerie on the floor. My chest tightened. The guys entered the bedroom first. Tony turned just as the taser shot him. He twitched and collapsed on Connie. The men pulled him off and stuffed him into the laundry cart. Connie screamed but was quickly gagged. In less than a minute, Tony was gone. Connie was bound with duct tape. I turned on the overhead light and entered the room, weapon in hand. She squirmed and cried. I pointed the weapon at her face, letting her fear build. Carlo watched me closely, worried I'd snap. I pulled the trigger, but Carlo grabbed my hand, stopping me. Connie wet herself in terror. Carlo took the weapon, furious but laughing. Connie shook with fear and shock, tears streaming. I pulled off my mask. She gasped and passed out. Carlo checked his phone. It was time to leave. We slipped down the stairs and exited the back of the hotel. In the car, we drove in silence, each lost in thought, heading for the meeting place. "You took the bullets out, you cretin. I thought you'd lost it for a second," Carlo said, glaring at me. I grinned. "I wasn't going down for liquidating her, just wanted to scare her. She'll get the message when she sees Tony. The guys will handle him." "No need to get your hands dirty, Sal. He'll remember." "I need to be sure," I replied, staring ahead as we walked through the dark streets. We entered the bar where Alfredo was waiting. It was almost 1 a.m. He poured us drinks and we sat by the fireplace. As the adrenaline faded, we started feeling human again. The past few hours had been a blur of pain and anger. Now, in the warmth, we ate in silence. Carlo's phone beeped and he smiled at me. "It's done. The boys are on their way," Carlo announced. "I can't thank them enough. I'll never forget this night," I said, a mix of gratitude and sorrow in my voice. "Sal, shut up. It's over. You have other battles now. Deal with her. You don't have to please me," Carlo responded firmly. "Of course. I understand," I replied, remembering leaving Connie at the hotel. How would she get home? Would she confess? Doubtful. We had rooms ready. I felt suddenly exhausted as Alfredo showed me to mine. I collapsed on the bed, unable to sleep as I replayed the night's events and thought about Connie. I was sad and disgusted. I had loved her so much, but now it was over. I had the divorce papers. She was supposed to deliver them today. By the time I got home, she'd know what I knew. But what if she didn't go home? She might go to Terry's. I'd better reroute the papers there. After about 7 hours, Alicia woke me with coffee. "It's lunchtime, Sal. You have 30 minutes, Carlo said. "You have an afternoon flight. Get up. Your clothes are on the dresser." She left. I got dressed and looked in the mirror. I was different. Last night, I almost eliminated a man and watched him get led to his end of life. I felt nothing, no regrets. Tony deserved it. I joined the others at the table. We ate, chatted, and laughed. Soon, it was time to leave. We packed up and drove away. I waved to the faces watching us go. Their concern was comforting. I promised myself to return soon. I drove home slowly, feeling a growing dread. My anger was gone, replaced by a love for my wife. I dropped Carlo off, and Joanna hugged him like newlyweds. She hugged me tightly, too. "Sal, it's going to be okay. There's a tomorrow for you. Things will be tough for a while, but trust me, it will be okay," she said gently. I couldn't speak, but Carlo hugged me, and I headed home to face Connie. "Call me later, Sal," Carlo said. I nodded and drove off, feeling empty. I unlocked the door and went inside. The house was warm but not cozy, and it was silent. I checked the living room and kitchen. Nothing. It was 6 a.m. Connie should have been home unless she was trying to save our marriage. I checked my phone. No calls or messages. I sank into a chair. "What a goddamn anticlimax," I muttered as my anger began to rise. I saw a picture of Connie and me, felt a surge of rage, and threw it across the room. The frame punched through the wall and the glass shattered. "Screw you!" I shouted. As I was breathing hard, the phone rang. I grabbed it. "Hello?" I yelled into the receiver. "Is that you, Sal?" a trembling voice asked. "Yes, what do you want?" I replied angrily. "It's Terry, Sal." "Yes, Terry. Sorry for the timing. What can I do for you?" I tried to calm down. "It's Connie. She's here and in bad shape. She doesn't want to go home, thinks you might hurt her. She shouldn't drive. Terry said, her voice full of concern. Is she there? I interrupted. Yes. Ask her to talk to me. If she won't, let me know. Then ask her what happened, I instructed. I heard some mumbling and then louder voices in the background. Terry returned to the phone. She won't talk, Sal. I'm worried about her, Terry said, her voice strained. Be patient. Tell her I'll pick her up, I replied firmly. Terry relayed my words and I heard Connie scream in the background. Sal, I don't know what to say, Terry said, sounding distressed. It's okay, I responded, trying to steady my emotions. What do you mean? Terry asked, confused. I know all about it, Terry. Oh my God, Terry whispered, clearly shocked. I heard Terry relay my words to Connie, followed by more sobbing and screaming. Sal, I'm sorry, Terry said, her voice breaking. Me too, Terry. I know about the girls' nights out and how you and Phil fought about it, I revealed, my voice tinged with bitterness. She gasped. Oh God, no. Yes, I know. And I'll make sure the guy who did this pays, I said, my resolve hardening. Sal, I'm sorry. Phil and I tried to stop them. We should have told you, but we were in a bad situation. Terry spoke quickly, her voice filled with regret. I understand, Terry. Just make sure she stays there until I arrive, I instructed. I will. Be careful, Sal, Terry said, her voice softening. I will. See you soon, I replied before hanging up, my mind already racing with the next steps. Terry, I don't blame you or Phil. I'm just sad you didn't tell me sooner. Our friendship is damaged. Tell Connie I'm not coming to pick her up. Her things will be packed and ready for pickup, or they'll go in the trash. She doesn't live here anymore. She's getting some papers delivered today. I had them forwarded to your address. They should arrive any minute. Tell her to think carefully before doing anything. Got it? Okay, Sal. I hung up the phone and exhaled slowly. The anger drained out of me, leaving nothing. I had said everything needed. I felt calm but empty. Alone. Maybe she had been gone for a while and I just didn't notice. I missed her, hated her, and loved her. I replayed it all in my head, realizing I had been blind to the signs. Exhausted, I knew things were going to get worse before they got better. I'd have to confront her soon, but not now. I poured a glass of JD, let my mind go blank, and waited for sleep. I slept deeply, but woke up with a sore head and dry mouth. After a shower, I made coffee and sipped orange juice straight from the carton. As I waited for the coffee, the doorbell rang at 7:30. Hello? I answered, my voice rough with fatigue. Sal, it's Carlo. Are you okay? Didn't do anything stupid? Carlo's voice was filled with concern. I'm fine. Just a headache. She went to Terry and Phil's. I told her what I knew. It's all out now. Haven't heard from her since last night. She wasn't in great shape when she arrived, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. Carlo laughed. No surprise. Things seem to be going okay. The package was delivered, but we won't hear for a day or two. The family sends regards. Got it. Talk soon, I said, ending the call. I poured coffee, clearing my head. I had a lot to do. Call the office, locksmith, bank. Although I didn't want to lose her, I couldn't stay with her after the betrayal. Just after 9, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to see Terry and Phil standing there. Sal, we came to apologize. Can we talk? Terry asked. I let them in and pointed to the living room. They sat on the couch and I settled into the chaise lounge. Okay, what do you want to say? I asked, my tone cold. Sal, we're very sorry, Phil began. I'm sorry too, Phil. Sorry that my friends couldn't tell me my wife left me for a stranger. I have a lot of regrets, I said, feeling anger rise in me again. Sal, we tried to tell her to stop. She's at our place now, still confused. Something bad happened before she came back, Terry pleaded. What do you mean, Terry? I had to leave while the paperwork was being prepared. I assume you mean something happened between her and Tony, I said, not revealing my involvement yet. We don't know. We haven't heard from my brother, Phil said. Connie mumbled something about being tied up and left at the hotel. Come on, Phil. She should have said more. Did that cretin do something to her? Not that I care. But if I ever see him again, he better regret it. Make sure he knows that, I warned, my voice cold and threatening. Phil and Terry stared at me, stunned by my rage. Phil, especially, was visibly shaken. How's Connie doing? She got the papers last night, right? I asked, trying to maintain control. Yes, Sal. She calmed down eventually. But when she was served food, she started up again. She was upset, angry, and scared, but she wouldn't say what happened, Terry explained, her voice filled with concern. Good, I thought. Maybe now she'll remember every night. Well, guys, I hate her for what she did. If she's in pain, good. She made her bed with that idiot so she can stay with him. I'm done with her, I said, my voice full of finality. They looked at me, speechless at my anger. "Is there no way you can work things out, Sal?" Terry pleaded, tears filling her eyes. "She made a mistake, but you two are great together. Divorce is a big step. Please talk to her first. She deserves that." Terry's eyes showed genuine concern. I paused, knowing I'd have to talk to Connie eventually. "Okay, I'll talk to her. But first, I want all her stuff gone. It'll just be her and me, and I'll call to let her know when and where. Are you okay with that?" I said, setting my terms. Terry hugged me tightly while Phil looked around. "That's more than she can expect." "Yes, Sal, thank you. I'll tell her to expect your call. Please don't wait too long," Phil said, his voice sincere. Phil looked at me, sullen. "Sal, my brother isn't creep. You should kick his rear. I wouldn't blame you." I watched out the window as the couple drove away. They quickly got in their car and drove off towards my soon-to-be ex-wife. I sat back and considered Terry's words. Of course, I needed to talk to Connie, but I needed to cool down a bit before I could trust that woman. Keeping her at arm's length, I poured more coffee, savoring the strong flavor as it filled another large mug. I grabbed my phone, called Sadie, and caught up with her. For the next half hour, I listened to Sadie talk about how well she was doing without me. What a woman. Once she finished, she started telling me about Connie. It felt like listening to my mom. Eventually, she ordered me to come to her house tonight for dinner with her and her husband, and by the time I hung up, my ears still buzzing, I was sure she was at least half Italian. The rest of the day was spent rearranging locks, bedrooms, clothes, photos, everything I could think of that could be trashed, packed, or destroyed. By the end of the day, my anger, though still raging, had subsided a bit. Exhausted from all the emotional trauma, tears flowed easily down my face. I realized I was probably walking away without talking to Connie, but subconsciously, I had already decided to dump her. Everything was ready. All that was left was to set up the final showdown, and I knew I would be as hurt as she was. God damn it, how could you do this to me? To us? I sat staring out the window, thinking about how my marriage was crumbling. My heart ached, and only pain kept my anger in check. I knew I should make the call, but as I sipped another JD, I decided I would do it in the morning. I was too tired today to go a few hard rounds with her. I wanted to be at ease when I did. I had another restless dream. The call came early in the morning again, just before 7:30. The phone rang, jolting my brain out of the half-dream I'd fallen into. "Yeah?" I asked, stretching. "Sal, it's me, Phil. Listen, I just got a call from the hospital. My brother's been there for a few days now. He's been punched up pretty badly. He seems stable, but he's taken quite a punching. Both arms and legs are broken, and his balls are pretty well punched up. That's all I know." "I hope you don't expect me to sympathize, Phil. As far as I'm concerned, he's lucky he didn't meet me. I would have finished the job. Mark my words. If I ever see him again, it won't be long before I do." "Sal, I understand." "I wouldn't blame you if you did, so I won't ask the question. He got what he deserved. You're a stand-up guy and a friend, and I'm sorry I wasn't as good a friend to you as you were to me. I know I can't undo what's done, but I thought you might want to know about Tony, that's all." "Phil, it's not your fault. Remember that. It's just the way it is. Give my love to Terry. Bye and thanks." "Sure. Bye." I hung up and stared out the window at the garden, which was peaceful with the occasional bird flocking to the bird table and eating the food I put out. Sitting on the chaise lounge and watching nature through the glass always calmed me down and helped me think, and today was no exception. I called Carlo on his cell phone to give him the news about Tony. He only snorted but noted that the job was well done. His guys did well and got the result they needed. He laughed when I listed Tony's injuries. Serious enough, but not life-threatening unless he did something stupid. Carlo said he could give him the appropriate message to behave, but I didn't think that was wise. I was sure Phil would convey my feelings, which would be better and safer. We left it at that, and I went back to looking out the window. As I sipped my second coffee of the day, the phone rang again, but I let it go to the answering machine. As I listened, I heard Connie's voice hesitantly leaving a message. "Sal, please call me. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. I need to explain. I need you. I need to come home. I'm so sorry." There were sobs between the pleas. With each word, my heart sank as if it were being strangled in my chest. When the message ended, I found myself breathing heavily. I wanted to pick up the phone, but my hand wouldn't reach for it. Even the sound of that woman's voice still bugged me. I knew I would have to do it today, but I wanted her to wait so she wouldn't think I was answering her message. I wandered around the house for a couple more hours, and the house seemed empty and deserted. I looked around where Connie's things used to be. There were voids. I called Sadie and asked a couple of guys to come over with a van to move all her stuff. An hour later, the boxes and bags I had packed were stacked in the back of the van. As I watched the van pull away towards Connie, I knew that pretty soon my phone would buzz as she picked up her stuff and the realization that she had screwed up would hit hard. It was a one-way trip. The phone rang again. It was Terry. "Sal, Connie's stuff has arrived. Just letting you know we've accepted it. The guys apparently dropped most of it off at the warehouse. Thanks for that, Sal. We only have the stuff you marked as personal. Connie is still in shock. I know she called you earlier. Could you talk to her or call her later?" "Put her on, Terry. Let's get this over with," I said, my voice heavy with frustration. I waited a few seconds before I heard her voice. "Hello?" came a frail voice to my ear. "Connie." "Oh my God, Sal, I'm so sorry." "I never meant to," she said, her voice trembling. "So you didn't think about the fact that you might get caught, huh?" I spat venomously. "Sal, she started. "Leave it, Connie. Now you have the answer to all those questions you didn't even think to ask yourself. All the time you were having fun with that lowlife," I interrupted, my anger boiling over. "Sal, can't we—" she tried again. "Do you really think you can tell me anything that will make everything okay? Well then, do your best. I'm all ears," I said sarcastically. "Can I come home and talk to you, please?" she pleaded, desperation in her voice. "Why, Connie? To explain how sorry you are? To try and patch up the mess you created? No, you stay right where you are. I'll let you know when and where we can talk. But you're not stepping foot in this house until I'm ready," I replied coldly. "Sal, I need to see you. I need to explain," she insisted. "You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy everything we had. I'll call you when I'm ready. Until then, don't try to contact me. Do you understand?" I said firmly. "Yes, Sal, I understand," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Goodbye, Connie," I said, ending the call. I leaned back, feeling a mix of anger and relief. There was a long road ahead, but for now, I needed to clear my mind and prepare for the next steps. I thought for a few seconds, trying to regain control of my emotions. Her voice was bugging me, and I could feel my heart pounding out of my chest as if trying to break free. My breathing quickened as my mind fought for control. Finally, I took a deep breath. "Tonight, here at 7. Come or not, it's all the same to me. It's a one-time offer, and it's only valid until 5 minutes after 7. I'll listen, but I'm not promising anything." I heard her sigh at my rudeness and ended the conversation. I sat listening to her voice and could feel the pain in her voice. I wondered if she felt mine. I sat and reflected on my marriage and how happy I thought we were. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but I was sure we were happy and hadn't had anyone else before. That cretin. Then I thought about why I was so sure. Did I even know her? I hadn't suspected anything before, but that didn't mean she hadn't done it before. I felt confused again, trying to make sense of what I knew for sure and the black cloud looming over me representing all the things I didn't know for sure. The clock chimed in the hallway. I knew it was past 6. I listened to the chimes and they told me it was indeed 6:45. She, the woman, would be here soon, and I needed to control my emotions and prepare for what would surely be the last act of my marriage. The doorbell broke into my train of thought and shook me out of the fog of self-pity I'd fallen into. It crept up on me slowly as I tried not to think too deeply about what was ahead of me. I began to ask myself questions over and over again. Why? Why now? Freed from my gloomy thoughts, I took a step toward the door and swung it open. I saw Connie the first time I'd seen her since that night at the hotel. Her hair, though combed and neat, was pulled back, giving her face a rather gaunt look. There was very little makeup, further adding to the pallor of her face. Her shoulders seemed to slump and sag as she entered the lobby. I followed her and noticed that a few days make a difference when you are caught off guard, as she was. I watched her look around the living room, gasping, and then suppressing sobs as she noticed the gaps on the walls and in the room where the photos and memorabilia used to be. She looked at me with her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. "It's all gone," I said coldly. "If you look around the rest of the house, you'll see there are a lot of empty spaces." I paused before saying anything else. She looked at me again, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I didn't realize, Sal. I didn't mean for it to happen. I wasn't thinking," Connie said, her voice trembling with regret. "I know, but this is the result of your cheating, your infidelity, your extramarital lovemaking with another man. All of it is yours." "I hope you're satisfied," I replied, my words cutting through the air like knives. The words came out sincerely and venomously, each one hitting my soon-to-be ex-wife hard. She sat down on the couch and I poured her a strong vodka and tonic. Handing it to her, I remained emotionless. She sipped the drink, looking at me. I swirled the ice in my glass and taking a good sip, leaned back in my chair, looking at her. "Okay, Connie, let's hear what you have to say," I said, my tone cold and detached. "I'm sorry, Sal, I couldn't help it. I got in over my head and then it got addictive," she confessed, tears welling up in her eyes. "Connie, just so you know, I talked to Terry and Phil and they filled in the gaps in my knowledge. I know what and where and with whom. I just don't know why," I said, my voice rising with controlled anger. "I can't answer that question. It was so new and exciting. I guess I fell for his crap," she admitted, looking ashamed. "But you had fun with him, not once or even twice, but for weeks on end," I said, feeling my rage building again. I took a sip and a few deep breaths, trying to stay calm. She looked down at her feet. "I know I can't justify what I did, Sal. I was wrong. Is there any way we can get past this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I dodged the question. "What about Tony? What happened to him? Where's the cretin?" I demanded. Connie fidgeted and finally looked up at me, eyes fixed into mine, defiant as she tried to figure out what to say. "We were caught in the hotel that night. There were people there, I think 5 or 6, but Tony was just taken. 1 minute he was there and then he was gone. Did you set that up, Sal?" she asked, her voice shaking. I stared back at her, sipping my drink again, ignoring her question, though I wondered if she realized it was me in her face that night before she passed out. "It was horrible. They took him away and he disappeared. Then they tied me up and the man put a weapon to my head. I know he pulled the trigger, but at that moment I lost consciousness. I was terrified I was going to die. When I came to my senses, I was alone," she recounted, her voice breaking. She saw the smile on my face as I savored her discomfort. I watched as a shiver ran through her, and my eyes were locked on hers. "So, what happened to your lover?" I asked mockingly. "Sal, don't call him that. He's not my lover. Yes, I know I had lovemaking with him, but I have no feelings for him. I love you and only you," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "You love me so much that you've been having fun with this creep for weeks." Now she leaned back on the couch at my sudden and furious outburst. "So tell me why I should give you the time of day since you've already proven yourself to be a liar and a cheat. How do I know everything you say is true? How the hell do you expect me to believe a single word you say? Tell me." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she felt the depth of my anger for the first time. "So have you been communicating with your lover?" I asked again, emphasizing lover to make her uncomfortable, to provoke her. I wanted her to suffer like I had. She looked at me through her tears. "I haven't heard from him at all. All I know is he's in a hospital somewhere, and that's all Phil said. I don't want to hear anything about him. He ruined my life. I wish he was dead." "Well, I couldn't agree more," I smirked. I watched her face, sure she was furious about being caught and left to fend for herself. She had messed up, and now she was getting what she deserved. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching each other, waiting for the right moment. I took my time, wary of unleashing my pent-up rage. I wanted to slap her, but had to stay in control. She looked around the living room, searching for a distraction. She sighed when she noticed our wedding picture missing from the mantel. As she stared at the empty spot, I met her gaze and glanced at the dent in the wall. To answer her question, she brought her hand to her mouth. She got up and moved around the room, noting each empty space. I watched her absorb the missing memories. Every trace of her seemed to have vanished from the first floor. She sank back onto the couch. "Sal, all is lost. Is there really no chance?" She looked at me, defeat in her eyes. I took a deep breath. "Connie, I loved you like no one else. What you did ripped my heart out and stomped on it. Being with that idiot was disrespectful and showed complete disregard for my feelings and those of our friends. You were seen openly with him in public. You don't need to tell me it was just lovemaking or I didn't want to hurt you. You did it, and now you're going to pay the price. Your lover has already started to pay for what he did, and rightly so. I will cripple him, but slowly. I'll destroy you just like you destroyed what we had. Connie, we're done. Finito. Now, I'm sorry. I haven't heard anything from you to make me change my mind. So if you sign the divorce papers, we can both move on with our lives. I don't want to see or hear from you anymore. I'm done with you. Now get out of my house, you cheating strumpet." She sat there in shock as my words hit her. She had really messed up, but right now, I didn't care about her. My anger would help me deal with her. She gathered herself and got up to leave. I followed her to the door. When she opened her car door, she looked back at me and muttered, "Sorry." I raised my hand, mimicking a weapon, and watched the recognition creep into her face. Click. She shrieked and nearly collapsed as she climbed into the car. I closed the door behind her. Temporary duty assignments, TDY, can sometimes be fun and exciting, but this one was not. It was 30 days of almost round-the-clock hard work. Every year, the U.S. Army participates in a rapid deployment exercise. Several units from across the Army are selected to participate and are airlifted with all their equipment to Germany, where they engage in a month-long exercise with their NATO counterparts. My name is Fred Sadler. At the time, I was a relatively new captain in the U.S. Army working in the Operations Division stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. This deployment came at the worst possible time for me to be anywhere other than home with my wife, who was pregnant and due to deliver sometime during the deployment. Lydia and I had been married for almost 6 years. When the deployment began, my commanding officer said, "I give you a personal guarantee that I will do everything in my power to get you home before the baby is born." And he did. At the end of the exercise, I packed my things and was about to get on a plane. I called Lydia, who told me she thought she was going to be hospitalized in the next couple of days. "Then the timing must be perfect because I'm on my way home," I told her. It was dusk. I was driving to the airport when a deer ran out into the road. My driver swerved to avoid it, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in a military hospital in Frankfurt. My right arm, right leg, 3 ribs on my side were broken, and my right lung had collapsed. "How long have I been here?" I asked my nurse. 5 days. "Is my wife here?" "No, sir." I called Lydia. "Are you okay?" were her first words. "Don't mind me. How are you, and the baby?" She began to cry. "We lost the baby, Fred." "I'm so sorry." "Are you okay?" I asked. "Physically, I'm fine, but emotionally, I'm a mess." 2 weeks later, I was flown home on a medevac airplane. Lydia met me and traveled with me to the Fort Hood Hospital. She was still an emotional wreck, but our time together seemed to help us both. I was in the hospital for another 2 weeks before I was discharged on limited duty. 2 years after we lost a child, we were transferred to Heidelberg, Germany. We spent 3 years there traveling all over Europe. There I was promoted to major. After 3 years, we were transferred to Fort Lewis, Washington. Being a major, we were given field-grade officers' quarters. They were much nicer than company grade and had garages, not just carports. When we moved into the cabin in Lewis, all the things we took with us to Germany were sent back. We unpacked those boxes as well as the boxes we had stored and did not take with us. Using a box cutter, I opened one of the many boxes and began to take things out of it. It was the box we had stored things in while we were in Germany. About halfway down was a small wooden box that I didn't remember seeing before. I placed it on top of the stack of boxes and opened it. My life changed forever. There was a small stack of envelopes with a pink ribbon around them. I pulled the ribbon away and picked up the top envelope. It was unsealed, and I opened it. Inside was an official document labeled birth certificate. As I looked at the document, my mind began to fog up. It stated that a baby girl weighing 7 pounds 6 ounces and 19 inches long was born alive, and it included the date. It was the same date Lydia had told me our baby was not alive when born. The baby was named Hope. It went on to say that the mother's name was Lydia Jane Sadler Nee Johnston. Where the father's name was listed, there was a note that said, "Unknown." I picked up the next envelope. It, too, was unsealed. I pulled out a multi-page document. It was an adoption certificate. I read it several times. The gist of it was that a child named Hope, born to Lydia Sadler, had been given up for adoption and stripped of all parental rights. It went on to say that since the identity of the biological father is unknown, his permission is not required. How many men had she slept with in that time? Did she know? She had to know that even in marriage, we need personal space and thoughts. I drove up to the golf course, parked the car, and headed to the 19th hole where there was a bar diner and restaurant. I ordered 2 eggs over medium heat and corned beef hash. This used to be my favorite breakfast until Lydia changed my eating habits. I managed to eat most of it and sat on the deck while the golfers finished the 18th hole and went inside. When I got home, it was the middle of the day. She had made a lot of progress in taking down boxes and organizing the house. I went to my unit and went into the office. There was no one there except the officer on duty. I sat down at my desk and tried to work, but my heart was not in it. When I got home, it was past midnight. She was lying in bed reading. I undressed and took a shower. "I'll sleep downstairs," I announced as I walked out and closed the door. I had just turned on the TV and was getting comfortable on the couch when she walked in, grabbed the remote, turned off the TV, and stared at me. "Cut the crap. Tell me what's wrong and I'll either help you or leave. Which is it? I haven't done anything wrong, so I won't tolerate you yelling at me when I'm trying to help or having to get out of your way when you try to run me down." I walked over to her, took the remote from her hands, and turned the TV back on. "Have a safe trip," I said. She left less than an hour later. On Monday morning, I talked to my commander and told him my story. I even showed him the documents. He was as dumbfounded as I was. "What do you plan to do?" he asked me. "I'm not sure." "Did she say where she was going when she left?" "No, sir, but she didn't take all her things, especially the box." There was a pause before I spoke again. "I was thinking of trying to find my daughter if she is my daughter and proceed from there." "It would be virtually impossible. In adoption cases, confidentiality is very important to both parties," he said. "I understand, but I have to do something. I have to start somewhere, and I don't trust her to tell me the truth anymore." Then I literally jumped up. "Oh my God, I have an idea. Can I have the day off?" "Sure." I saluted and ran out of his office and building into the parking lot where I jumped in my car and drove home. I opened the box, pulled out a wooden box, and dumped the contents on the floor. There was a pacifier in there. A pacifier? Hope must have used it before she was taken. I put the box back together, put the pacifier in a clear plastic bag, and sealed it. I got on the internet trying to find a DNA lab in the area. There was one in downtown Seattle. I went into the bathroom, but all of Lydia's things were gone. I rummaged through the cabinet under the sink, found her old hairbrush, put it in another plastic bag along with the bag that held the pacifier, and hauled back to Seattle. "We'll call you in about 3 weeks," she said. I didn't hear from Lydia for another whole day. "Hi," I said. "Are you feeling better?" "Better than what?" "Better than the idiot you were a couple days ago." "No, same old idiot." "Why 3 weeks?" "Exactly. By then I should know if I'm going to eliminate you or just divorce you." I ended the conversation. The phone immediately rang, and I ignored it. The next day when I got home, Lydia was already there. She met my car as I pulled up to the house. She was furious. "What do you mean you're going to either liquidate me or divorce me?" "Exactly what I said." "I think I deserve an explanation," she said. "Me too." "About what?" she asked. We were still in the driveway. "You mean you don't need to explain anything?" I asked. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. So there's no hope for us," I said, putting as much emphasis as possible on the word hope. "What do you mean there's no hope for us? What have I done?" Then it hit her. "Oh my God, no, please no." "I'll be back in an hour and you'd better not be here. I'll leave for work in the morning at 6:30. I'll be back at 5. By then, all your stuff should be out of this house." I left. I came back exactly an hour later and she was gone. And so was the box and some of her things. When I got home in the evening, the house was almost empty. She had picked out almost all the furniture and taken it away. True, she left my favorite chair and a bedroom set for guests. The next morning, I called my office to let them know I would be late. I then called Post Housing and arranged for government furniture to be temporarily brought to my apartment. I also called the credit union, our stockbroker, the insurance company, and anyone else I could think of, and went about those mundane housekeeping things that are usually associated with divorce. I then made an appointment with a JAG, Judge Advocate General Army Lawyer. I knew they were not authorized to represent me in civilian court, but they could advise me. They confirmed what I suspected. She would get half. We lived in public housing, so we didn't own a house, but we had enough equity to buy one if we wanted to. Both our cars were paid off. My life continued for a couple more weeks. I went to work, did my chores, mowed the lawn, and washed and cleaned my car. One morning, the phone rang. "Hello?" I answered. "Is that Major Fred Sadler?" "It is." "Major Sadler, this is Margie from the DNA Analysis Center. A few weeks ago, you gave us some samples to test." "Yes, I did." "Well, the results are in, and you can come in and look at them." "Can't you just tell me now?" "No, sir, I can't. We can either mail them to the address you gave us or show them to you in person. We have no way to verify over the phone that you are who you say you are. We have to see identification. We can mail the results because, as you may recall, we asked you for ID when you were here and we were able to verify your address." "I'll be there as soon as I can." I walked through their door, introduced myself, and asked for Margie. She came out and we shook hands. She asked to see my identification. "Come with me, please," she said. I followed her into a small room. She asked me to wait. She left and came back a couple of minutes later. She handed me the pacifier and then spoke. "Sample A is yours, Sample B is from the hair you gave us, and Sample C is from the pacifier. We were able to determine that samples B and C are positively related. Sample A is not related to either B or C." "Thanks," I said, took the pacifier, put it in my pocket, took the papers, and left. I got into my car. At least I didn't have a daughter calling some other man daddy. But someone else did. JAG was not authorized to recommend specific law firms or attorneys, but the JAG officer I spoke with was able to provide me with a list of approved attorneys and firms. The next day, I started calling them. I made 6 appointments. At the 3rd appointment, I found my man. He was a retired JAG officer and hated cheating spouses, both wife and husband. I spent over an hour telling him my story. When I got home, it was late. There was a letter in the mailbox. It was from Lydia. "Fred, 3 weeks are up. Lydia." Short and to the point. The return address was her parents' address in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. I called her. "Hi, Fred," she said. "I won't talk about it over the phone, and I'm certainly not flying to Pennsylvania, so I guess you'll have to come here. If you mean Seattle, I'm already here. I sent a letter last week when I was there. I'll be at the house at 6:30. Come over then," I told her. She hung up. I didn't make any special arrangements. No drinks, no cheese, no crackers, nothing. This was supposed to be a business meeting. I put the DNA documents and my copies of the birth certificate and adoption papers on the government-issued coffee table. She pulled up to the driveway at 6:20, but waited until exactly 6:30 to ring the bell. I was in no hurry to answer it. Opening the door, I invited her in and indicated where she should sit. I sat on the couch. She sat in the uncomfortable straight-back chair across from me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a pacifier and held it out to her. She grabbed it and held it to her bosom. "Thank you," she said, as if I'd given her $1 million. Then I handed her a copy of the DNA test results. "You already know I'm not the father, but this will confirm it." She reached for the results and took them with her left hand. The pacifier remained clutched in her right. "I take it you are Sample A?" she asked. "Yes." Then I pushed the rest of the papers toward her. Without saying anything, she leaned forward, read the title on the top sheet, and tears welled up in her eyes. She set the DNA test results aside and picked up the dissolution of marriage application. She started to read it, but the tears were already flowing freely and falling onto the form, so she set it aside. "Can I have a tissue?" she asked. "I don't have any." "You're not making it easy for me, are you?" she asked. "You cheated," I said. She nodded. "How many times?" I asked. "Does it matter?" "No, I just want to know. One weekend, different men, just one." "Who is he?" "Then again, does it really matter?" "Again, I just want to know. I think I deserve it." "I'm not going to tell you." "Do I know him?" "I'm not going to tell you." "So you'd rather protect him than try to save your marriage?" She picked up the divorce petition. "Our marriage is over anyway. Why ruin it?" "Okay, but you have to tell me why you lied about your daughter being not alive when born." "When I found out I was pregnant, I wasn't sure if it was your baby or his. I thought about getting infanticide, but I couldn't. Over time, I was able to reason that you can't know for sure if it's your baby or not. When we found out it was going to be a girl, I was even more sure you wouldn't know, because there is a special bond between dad and daughter, and I was sure you and her would look alike. As the time of her birth approached, I started to get nervous. Maybe you would find out she wasn't yours. Then you went away on a business trip and my nerves calmed down a bit. I was glad you wouldn't be around when she was born. Then you told me you were flying home and I started to get nervous again. My emotions have been on a roller coaster. Maybe you'll know, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll be there when she's born. Maybe you won't. I was nervous then. She was there, alive and perfect. She was placed on my chest and I looked at her and fell in love. She was beautiful. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. She paused. Just like her father's. You have brown hair and brown eyes. No one in our families has blonde hair and blue eyes. I knew she wasn't yours. She was my daughter, and you were my husband. I loved you both, but I knew I had to choose between you. I chose you. The hospital staff helped me when I told them I wanted to give her up for adoption. Within 24 hours, I had the papers in my hands. They asked who the baby's father was, and I said I didn't know. They said it would be easier that way, because if I knew who the father was, they would have to get his permission. I just bosomed her and held her in my arms. She was sucking on a pacifier when they brought me the papers to sign. I knew I had to tell you something, so I made up the lie that she was not alive when born and her remains were cremated when you came home. I couldn't believe you didn't ask to see the birth certificate, certificate of pass away, or anything else. I still can't believe it. I trusted you, I said. I had no reason not to trust you. Besides, it was so traumatic that I saw no reason to add to our suffering by looking at those pieces of paper. Eventually, you and I got our lives back to normal, and I was almost happy. But a part of me was missing. It still is. And it gets worse every year. On her birthday, I always took the time to pull out her birth certificate, touch her little footprints, and hold her pacifier. There were times when I wanted to put it in my mouth to feel closer to her, but it had some of my dried bosom milk on it, and I wanted to preserve it, so I didn't. They must have scraped it off at the DNA lab. Oh my God, it's gone. She groaned, then looked at me. It's gone. Her milk is gone, you idiot. You took her milk. She fell to her knees and literally curled up in a ball on the floor. I picked her up and put her on the couch. I couldn't let her leave in that condition, so I covered her with a blanket and went to my bedroom, but not to bed. She remained there for several hours. At midnight, I heard the toilet flush. I went downstairs. She was sitting on the couch. Would you like some coffee? I asked. Yes, please. She sat down at the counter while I brewed her a cup. She took a sip. I guess I got a little cold feet, huh? Sort of. We sat in silence and drank coffee. More? I asked. Yes, please, she replied. Where are you staying? I asked, brewing 2 more cups. At the motel. You were there for more than 3 weeks? No, I was with my parents most of the time. Do they know the truth? No, I lied to them too. I told them that you and I were going through a difficult time and I needed to get away from you for a while. They paid for me to visit them. They think I came back to help sort out our difficulties. She looked around, walked over to the coffee table, pulled a pen out of her purse, sat down, signed the divorce papers without reading them, and left. When I woke up, it was the middle of Sunday morning. I spent the rest of the day thinking. I took the divorce papers to my attorney on Monday, and he filed them. I've been thinking a lot about who Lydia cheated with. She never told me who he was or how the affair started. It wasn't just that she cheated and got pregnant that made me angry. It was that she defended the idiot and wouldn't tell me who he was. The only thing she told me was that it only lasted 1 weekend. Fortunately, I was so busy at work that I didn't have time to think about anything else. 2 weeks later, I was back at Fort Hood where Lydia and I were living when her daughter was born. Usually military seminars are pretty intense, but this one was relaxed. We were divided into groups of 3 to work on a project. It turned out that there were 6 groups of 3 and there were 2 left, a major from Alaska and myself. We developed a close friendship almost immediately. It seemed like we'd known each other all our lives. His name was Keith Franklin, and as I said, he was stationed in Alaska at Fort Wainwright, the coldest base in the U.S. Army. But he loved it there. He was a computer genius, and we were so far ahead of everyone else that we had to slow down and wait for them to catch up. On Friday of the first week, we had lunch at the officers' club. He told me about his personal life. He cheated on his wife, and she divorced him. She is now living with some civilian, and his 2 children call the other man Daddy. Toward the end of lunch, I laid out my story too. When I finished, he had a strange look in his eyes. And you don't know who the man she had an affair with is? No, she didn't tell me. And that was here in Hood? Yes, 5 years ago. It's almost 6. Blonde hair and blue eyes. That's what she said. Come with me. We went to the Manpower Center. Everyone assigned to Fort Hood had to go through it. We walked right into the HR director's office. She saw us, stood up, and went around her desk to give Keith a hug. She looked to be about 60 years old and had a sparkle in her eyes. I liked her, and I hadn't even talked to her yet. Aunt Lucy, this is Fred Sadler. Hi, Fred, she said, shaking my hand. Hello, Mrs. Healy's nameplate on her desk read, Mrs. Healy. I began call me Aunt Lucy. Everyone does. Aunt Lucy began. Keith, do you remember the fair-haired, blue-eyed officer who may have been here about 6 years ago? She thought for a few seconds. No, but I don't always see everyone who passes through here. They all have to, but that doesn't mean I see them. She thought some more. Fred Sadler, you were here around that time, weren't you? I remember that name. Yes, my wife and I were here, I said. I looked at Keith as if asking how she remembered that. Keith looked at me. Aunt Lucy has Sam, and she can remember just about anything she's read, seen, or been involved with. That includes people. She can remember everyone she's ever met. Sam? I asked. Yes, supreme autobiographical memory. It's a state of being. Or a curse, Aunt Lucy interrupted. Or a curse? Keith continued. Very few people have it. Aunt Lucy is Fort Hood's institutional memory, especially when it comes to personnel matters. Isn't that right, Aunt Lucy? Unfortunately. I looked at her, then at Keith, then back at her. You remember everything? Everything that happens to me personally. Jesus, I said. How do you have room for all this? We don't know. It's just always there. Does it have any downsides? I asked. Oh, God, yes. I remember the good as well as the bad. It can cause depression if you allow yourself to do that. I can only imagine, I told her. Aunt Lucy, Keith interrupted again. Fred, he pointed at me. He's looking for someone who was here at the same time. The only thing he knows about him is that he was blonde with blue eyes, she laughed. That's it? No height, no weight, no rank, no assignment, not even his initials. No, ma'am, I said. Calling me ma'am is a waste of good oxygen, Fred. I'm Aunt Lucy. Give me time to think and maybe ask around. Does it matter? Keith looked at me and I answered, Yes, Aunt Lucy, it's important. Oh, he was about the same age as me when I was here, if that helps, and he was in the Army. Officer or private? I suppose he was an officer if he was in the Army. So you don't even know if he was in the service? No, I don't. Or a civil servant? No. I'm sorry, I know it's not much to go on. She laughed. Yeah, there's just nothing to target. There can't be more than 2,000 blonde-haired, blue-eyed men I've encountered in the last few years, but I'll see if I can narrow down the time frame. She took both of our phone numbers. 2 days later, she called Keith. I've been thinking about the man you asked about. I don't remember any blonde-haired and blue-eyed soldiers, either officers or privates, who were about the right age, but I know 2 civilians who work for the Office of Postal Engineers. One has worked there for about 30 years, so he's probably too old. The other has been working there for about 10 years. He's in charge of new construction now, but he used to be the head of the plumbing department. His name is Kurt Weber. There are about 15 other blue-eyed blondes on post, but the ages don't fit. And I didn't bother trying to remember civilians living off base because I assumed that when Major Sadler was here, he didn't have time to make many civilian friends. Keith told me, and I immediately started planning how to meet Weber, find out if he was the right man, and maybe get a little revenge. The men who prey on the wives of our military personnel are the second lowest form of life on the planet. The lowest, of course, are those who prey on wives when the serviceman is overseas. These idiots deserve the worst fate imaginable. The next morning, I was sitting on the next street over from Weber's house in my rental car. I was hoping he was golfing or doing some homemade crafts, so maybe he was on his way to the local hardware or lumber store. I had been sitting there for almost 2 hours when I saw his car pull out of the garage and speed down the street. Thank God, I thought. I didn't feel like sitting here all day to see if he'd gone somewhere, but I was willing to do it if I had to. I followed him to the Home Depot. We parked and I followed him into the store. He was obviously known there because he talked to a few of the employees. There was a spot right in front of the door where there was a coffee urn. I knew enough about Home Depot to know that their regular contractor customers could treat themselves. Weber helped himself and stood sipping his drink while he chatted with one of the salesmen behind the counter. Watching Mr. Weber, I realized not only did he have physical engaging with my wife and make her pregnant, but he chewed gum with his mouth open. Other than spitting on the sidewalk, I couldn't think of anything more disgusting. The clerk Weber was chatting with had to go help a customer, so Weber took one last sip of coffee, spit the gum into a paper cup, and walked away, unwrapping another piece of gum. I walked over to the trash can, looked in it, and saw right on top of it a paper coffee cup with a pack of gum in it. I looked around, didn't see anyone, and took the cup. I got in the car and called Keith. I told him what I had. He laughed and told me to hurry back, that he might have something bigger by the time I got there. When I approached, he was literally jumping from place to place and waving some papers around. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "You won't really believe it." He grabbed my arm. "Look at this." "No, you better sit down." I did. He sat down next to me and put the papers in front of me. "Now look." There were a few names and an address. "So?" I asked. "So what?" "That's Hope's name, address, and her family's name. Her name is Sarah now. Sarah Randolph. I hacked into the files of an adoption agency. Those files are encrypted better than the nuclear missile launch codes carried by the President of the United States." Then he stopped and calmed down. "Well, I didn't personally hack their files. My brother did. But it's the same thing. I started to laugh. That's great, Keith, but what exactly am I going to do with it? I have no idea, but you have them. Maybe we can blackmail someone. Oh, that's great. I can already see the headlines. 2 Army officers tried to blackmail a 6-year-old foster child. That's a great one. He tossed the papers on the coffee table and leaned back in his chair. Yes, I see where you're going with this. He got a little flustered again. But we cracked their defenses. That's something. Yeah, that's something, I said, laughing. I carried the papers and coffee cup back to my Beau Queue and placed them on the desk. I have no idea why I did it, but I looked up the address where Hope lived and drove there early Sunday morning. It was almost 200 miles to Corsicana. The house was a typical suburban house. I sat outside for about an hour observing American suburbia on a typical Sunday. The noise of a few lawnmowers, the screams of children, and the chatter of neighbors. No activity came from Hope's house until almost noon. A car pulled up to the driveway. There were 3 people in the car. A man was driving. A woman was in the front passenger seat, and a child was in the right rear seat. The woman got out of the car, closed her door, and reached for the right rear door. I was at the ready with my cell phone. The woman removed the child from the car seat and placed the child on the ground, then knelt down to straighten the baby's dress. I had just enough time to take a few pictures. I heard a noise next to my car. A woman and a child were walking by. Sarah! The child next to my car squeaked, and she ran towards another child who I realized was Hope and ran towards her. They were only a few feet away from my car, and I took a few more quick pictures. I started my car and drove off before either of the 2 women became interested in the strange car and man parked on their street. I drove a short distance away and stopped to look at the pictures. 4 were absolutely perfect. I could even make out her blue eyes. I drove back to Fort Hood the following week. Keith and I finished the course with ease. We graduated on Friday and then had dinner and a few drinks together. Saturday morning, we went to the airport and flew home, Keith to Alaska and me to Seattle. The following Monday was a school day, so I had the day off. I took Lydia and Hope Margie's DNA reports to the DNA testing center. She didn't remember me until I reminded her about the pacifier. I gave her Lydia and Hope's DNA results and handed her a coffee cup with gum. See you in 3 weeks, I said as I left. In fact, it only took 2. This time she gave me the results over the phone. It's a married couple, no doubt, she said. Mother, father, and child. She would send me the official results in the mail. Okay, I had all the information I needed. But what was it for? What was I going to do with it? All it did was confirm that Weber was, in fact, the guy Lydia had cheated with. I went to Walmart and bought paper and envelopes. I also made copies of 2 photographs of Hope in the DNA reports belonging to Weber. Lydia and Hope. On the DNA reports, I cut off anything that could tell where the report came from. I put it all in an envelope. I made sure I had gloves on. From the moment I opened the bag of paper and the box of envelopes made copies of the photos and DNA reports. I even used self-adhesive stamps and water not saliva to seal the envelope. I made every effort to keep it untraceable. I addressed it to Mrs. Kurt Weber at their home address. I also included Lydia's name and her parents' address because I had no idea where she was. Then I drove to Seattle's main post office and dropped the letter in the mailbox. I had no idea what would happen in Killeen, Texas home of Fort Hood and the Weber family when the package arrived. The news from Killeen was a little over a month old. I got a call from Aunt Lucy. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer, she said. I'll do my best. Whatever you're doing isn't good enough. I need complete honesty. Is that what you and Keith did to Weber? Aunt Lucy, I don't mean to sound smart, but what did we do to him? Set him up so his wife would file for divorce? Okay, here's what I did. Keith had nothing to do with it. I told her the truth. Most of it anyway. I omitted Keith's part. You certainly stirred up a hornet's nest. Apparently, when his wife received your package, she didn't know if your DNA was his or someone else's. So she did it herself. She took some of his DNA and sent it off for processing. She also sent the profiles of that woman and the baby. They matched. And that's where it all went downhill. Who was the woman he was flirting with? She was my wife, Aunt Lucy. Oh, Jesus. I thought it might be something like that. Well, he was brought into the office yesterday, and he's not thrilled. He was ranting and raving all over the base. Good. Hearing from you that his marriage is over is the best news I've heard in a while. I just feel sorry for his family. It was over for me. Lydia and I were divorced, and Weber was on the road to divorce. I folded all the papers Keith had given me into a folder and put it in a box with other things I no longer needed but kept anyway. My life was moving on. Over the next few months, I went on a couple of dates, but nothing much happened. 2 years later, I returned to Fort Hood. I was surprised because I expected to be sent overseas like 90% of my classmates. Once in Hood, I found myself in Aunt Lucy's office. "How did you get back here?" she asked. "I have no idea." "Yes," came a voice from the past. It was newly promoted Lieutenant Colonel LTC, Keith Franklin. He walked into the office, closed the door, and we shook hands. It turned out I needed an assistant, and a major who had just graduated from CNGS was just what I needed, so I asked him. Keith and I had talked a few times since we arrived at the seminar, but hadn't seen each other. I was glad to see my friend. After registering, I took a vacation for 2 weeks. The first thing I did was to look for a house. Lydia and I had been saving up to buy it. I assumed that she would get half of it in the divorce, but since she didn't show up in court, I got everything. The branch manager walked by. He introduced himself as Dwight Randolph. We moved here about 6 months ago and settled in a brand new neighborhood. The houses are very nice and inexpensive. You get a lot of value for your money. He told me this, then went to his office and returned with a business card from the agent whose services he had used. I called her, and it only took me 3 days to find what I wanted. I paid more than half of the down payment, and the bank was happy to finance the rest. I started working with Keith and moved into my new house. The first things I bought were a bed, a chair, a big TV, and a lawnmower. I was spending my first night in my new house. It was already dark outside, and I had no curtains or drapes. There weren't even enough sheets to cover the big front window. I had just opened a beer and was holding a slice of pepperoni pizza in my hand when the doorbell rang. I had long since gotten off the no red meat diet Lydia had kept me on. I opened the door, and there stood a woman. "Hi, neighbor," she said. "My name is Samantha Randolph, but everyone calls me Sammy. We live in the neighborhood. We haven't lived here long ourselves, and I just wanted to say hello, introduce myself, and tell you that if you need anything, just ask." "Is your wife here?" I smiled. "Fred Sadler. No wife, divorced." I saw her frown. "But don't worry, I don't throw loud wild parties or even soft wild parties." She smiled. We chatted for a few more minutes before she left. The first week in my new home flew by. On Saturday morning, 3 women rang the doorbell and brought food. They also brought decorating ideas. They had seen my empty house with the lights on at night. As I sat in it with nothing but a chair, TV, beer, and pizza, they decided it was time to help me. The ringleader was Sammy Randolph. A couple of hours later, I had a slightly worn but nice leather couch, a dining table and chairs, and a small coffee table to keep the pizza off the floor. The ladies were about to leave when 3 small children came running in, chasing each other. One of the ladies, Ruth, grabbed 2 of the children, and Sammy grabbed the third. "Calm down, Sarah," she said, kneeling beside the child and brushing her blonde hair away from her blue eyes. "This is our new neighbor, Major Sadler." "Hello," she said confidently. "My name is Sarah." I leaned over. "Hi, Sarah," I said, looking into her piercing blue eyes. Blonde hair and blue eyes. I shook my head. "How old are you, Sarah?" "I'll be 7 soon." I stood up and we all said our goodbyes. As soon as they left, I went to the room that was to be my den, found the right box, opened it, and pulled out a folder. In it were the pictures I had taken. It was the same baby. I hadn't paid attention to the names of the foster parents before, but now I did. The adoption papers named Dwight and Samantha Randolph as Hope's adoptive parents. Sammy and her friend mostly decorated my house. It took a few weeks, and when it was done, we had a neighborhood open house. Sammy invited her sister-in-law, Joni Payne, who happened to be divorced. I hadn't enjoyed female companionship in a long time, and Joni and I hit it off right away. She was the last to leave the party, and I couldn't wait to call her. The next day, we met for lunch and had dinner with Dwight, Sammy, and Sarah. Sarah was brief because she wanted to go play with her friends. Over the next few months, we were together as often as possible. The first night we spent together was very good. We were sitting at the kitchen island when the doorbell rang. I threw on my robe and went to answer it. It was Sammy. "Good afternoon, Fred," she said as she walked inside. "We were wondering—" She saw Joni. "Well, what do we have here?" she asked, heading toward her sister-in-law. Joni was sitting on a stool eating a ham and cheese sandwich. As Sammy approached her, she set the sandwich aside and turned to face her sister-in-law. Her robe was open and Sammy reached up to close it. Joni laughed. "Too late for modesty, sis. He's already seen everything." "In fact, Never mind," Sammy said. I left the room and went upstairs to get dressed. When I came back, they were still discussing my bedspread. When they saw that I was dressed, they fell silent. The following weekend, Dwight and Sammy asked Joni to watch Sarah while the two of them went out to dinner. We were in the backyard watching Sarah in her sandbox. Without looking at Joni, I said, "She's a beautiful child, isn't she?" "Yes, she is." "Did you know she was adopted?" "Really?" "Yes. They've had her since she was born. According to the adoption agency, the birth mother was married, had an affair with a man she doesn't even remember, and got pregnant. Her husband was in the military. She didn't want him to find out about her affair, so she gave Sarah up for adoption. Dwight and Sammy were there to take her home. Sarah is the name her own mother gave her." "No, that name was Hope. It's on the birth certificate." "But Sammy and Dwight changed it. Sarah suits her better." "What happened to the birth mother and her husband?" "I have no idea. The adoption agency closes their files very tightly. They don't give the birth mother access to information about the adoptive family and vice versa." Sarah came over and wanted to sit on Joni's lap. She leaned her head against Joni's and fell asleep almost immediately. A few minutes later, Joni asked me to carry Sarah into the bedroom and put her to bed. It was my first time touching her, and I felt very uncomfortable. I gladly laid her down. 7 months later, Joni moved in with me. A year after that, we were married. We had a very happy year until the Army intervened. We were told we were being sent to Germany for 3 years of service. We took 2 trips to the States, one when her father and Dwight's father died, and the other for the reunion. Both times, of course, we saw Dwight and Sammy. We saw Sarah at the funeral. But when we went back for the reunion, she was at camp. After 3 years, we received orders to go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I was going as a new LTC assigned to the post headquarters as an executive officer under the post commander. This was normally a position for a colonel, not a junior lieutenant colonel, but I didn't mind. In the military world, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. To help me get settled in the staff, organized a series of briefings with the various departments that support the post. One of the briefings was to be given by a postal engineer. Representatives from that department, as well as the postal engineer himself, were already in the conference room when I arrived. I sat down in my seat at the table and watched as a blue-eyed civilian stood up to begin his speech. His hair was slightly blonde, but with a touch of gray. He introduced himself as Kurt Weber. I just stared at him. He had been talking for an hour, and I hadn't heard a word, and my gaze never left his face. It was obvious that he was uncomfortable with me looking at him. At the end of his speech, he asked if I had any questions. "Tell me, Mr. Weber, have you ever been to Fort Hood?" "Yes, sir. I was in the engineering department." "Did you like it there?" "Yes, sir." "Why did you leave?" "It's rather personal, sir." "You are correct. I withdraw the question. I just like to know about the people I work with. I seem to recall a scandal at the Fort Hood Engineering Department a few years ago. Do you know anything about that?" "I vaguely recall something about one thing. There was someone cheating, if I remember correctly." "Ah, well, I just remembered something. Thanks for the briefing. If you need anything at headquarters, feel free to contact me, just in case you forgot." I pointed to the name tag on my uniform. "My name is Sadler, Sadlar. Fred Sadler. I wouldn't want you to forget it." I was still looking straight into his eyes, and I could see the light bulb turn on and his eyes get huge. Kurt Weber became several different colors, ranging from red to pale gray. I got up and walked away. In the afternoon, I learned that Mr. Kurt Weber had requested a transfer. Unfortunately for him, this request had to go through me. When I received it the next day, I wrote in large letters, "Response: I have plans that involve Mr. Weber's expertise. He will play a key role in the realization of these plans." The next day, to the surprise of almost everyone, Mr. Kurt Weber tendered his immediate resignation. I signed it. Every day, I fell more and more in love with Joni. I watched her become increasingly beautiful and hot. Every morning, I looked in the mirror and saw an aging, middle-aged man, wondering what she saw in me. But whatever it was, I was grateful for it. We cherished our time together, and years flew by much faster than I wanted. We were stationed in Alaska and traveled to Killeen to visit Sammy and Dwight. On our first evening, they told us about a decision they had made with Sarah, who was almost 18. She had always known she was adopted and was now interested in finding her biological parents. Dwight and Sammy supported her decision, but the adoption agency offered no help, citing compliance with the law. All we heard that first day was how outdated the laws were and how they needed reform, especially since it's important for an adopted child to know their birth parents' health status. They decided to use a website dedicated to DNA and ancestry. They sent Sarah's DNA and waited to see what happened. Sarah hoped her biological mother could attend her high school graduation, but since it was only a couple of weeks away, they doubted it would happen. That night, Joni and I were already in bed when she asked, What are you going to do? About what? About Sarah? What about her? Come on, Fred. Married couples don't have secrets, or shouldn't have any. I found your little file 6 months after we were married. She can avoid DNA testing if you tell them everything you know. Oh crap, I said. Yeah, oh crap, why have you been silent all these years? I'm not sure. I guess I knew how sensitive you'd be about it. And Dwight and Sammy didn't need to know, so I kept quiet, but now it's become important and you have to address it. Any suggestions on how I can do this? Just tell the story, I suppose. How do you think they'll take it? Dwight is my brother and just like me, so he'll take it. Normally, Sammy is the dark horse. Okay, tomorrow. We'll get Sarah out of the house and tell them. She leaned over and kissed me gently. Do I ever bore you? She asked. What a silly question, I said. Of course you don't. Why did you even ask? Because you haven't touched me all day. I grinned and reached for the buttons on her pajamas. I can fix that right now. The next morning was Sunday. Sarah was picked up by her best friend and they went to the mall. I gathered the 4 of us around the table, took a deep breath, and began. I started by telling them that Joni and I had packed our things before we went downstairs, so we were ready if they wanted to kick us out. They looked at us, and Joni shrugged. Sarah doesn't need to give DNA to find her biological parents. I know who they are, I said. The looks they gave me made it clear I needed to explain, so I told them the whole story. When I finished, I took a deep breath and looked around the table. Dwight just stared at me, while Sammy had tears in her eyes. After a few seconds, she stood up, walked over to me, took my hands, pulled me into a hug, and said, "Oh, poor guy. Living with that all these years and not being able to talk about it. No one deserves that." She hugged me again. "What do you think, Dwight?" she asked her husband. "I'm trying to calculate the probability of how we all ended up together. I don't think there's a big enough number." "So what do we do now?" asked Sammy, returning to her chair. "I think Fred should contact his ex-wife and invite her to the prom since Sarah wants her there," Joni said. "Yeah, why me?" I protested. "Because you started it," Dwight grinned. "But who's going to contact Weber?" "Not me," I said, and told them about the last time I saw him. "You never told me that," Joni said. "I didn't realize you knew the whole story." Did I? She leaned over and kissed me. I love this woman, I thought. Later that day, when Sarah returned, Dwight and Sammy told her about it. She was both nervous and excited and wanted us to continue. The only way I knew to contact Lydia was through her parents, if they were still alive, if they still lived in Mechanicsburg, and if they still had a landline. I waited until Monday morning and talked to a private investigator. I asked him to help me find Lydia's parents and Kurt Weber. It took him 2 hours to get the parents' phone number. It took longer to find Weber. I called Lydia's parents, reminded them who I was, and told them I needed to talk to Lydia. I gave them my phone number to give to her. Not an hour later, my phone rang. "Hello, this is Lydia Bowman. I was given this number." "Hi, Lydia." "Fred?" "Yeah." "How's it going?" I asked, trying to think of something clever to say, but I couldn't. "Actually, I'm doing great. How are you?" "Very well. Lydia, I need to talk to you about something very important." "Okay, go ahead. Not over the phone. Tell me where we can meet, and we'll talk in person." "Explain it to me. We haven't spoken in years, and suddenly, out of the blue, you have something so important that it needs to be discussed in person." "That's it. I'm sorry, Fred, I'm not buying it." "Okay, but remember I gave you a chance." "A chance at what?" "Come on, Fred, what's the matter?" "Only in person, Lydia. Call me if you change your mind." Wait, okay. Damn it. We live in Vegas." "That's better. I'm flying out there tomorrow, and I'll call you when I land. You decide where you want to meet." The next day, we met in the lobby of the Bellagio Hotel. I guess she needed a lot of witnesses. "Hi, Lydia." "Hello, Fred. This is my husband, Roland Bowman." "Hi, Roland." I turned my attention back to Lydia. "I need to see you alone for 10 seconds. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Roland." "Whatever you say. But this is about the hope you had." She turned pale. "Can we still talk?" "Yes, he knows about her." "Okay, let's sit down." We found as quiet a corner as we could. Given where we were, I recommended something to drink. "Wine will do." We agreed to a red, and I ordered it. "Let's wait while we get some poured into our glasses." I paid for the wine, and we all took a sip. "Her name is Sarah. She's graduating in 2 weeks and wants you to be there." Roland and I watched her faint with a glass of wine in her hand, not spilling a drop. Roland took the glass, set it down, and patted her cheeks until she came to. What did you say? I repeated it. Then I pulled out Sarah's picture and showed it to Lydia. She started crying, gently touching the picture. She's beautiful. Where did you get this? I took it yesterday in her living room. You took it? How? Why? I told her the whole story from beginning to end, including our failed attempt to find Kurt Weber. She didn't know I knew his name and was shocked again. Initially stunned, she quickly grew really angry. Why didn't you ever tell me? Why did you keep her from me all these years? Her voice got louder and louder. Roland jumped up. Calm down. Calm down. You gave up all rights to her. Fred is breaking the law by doing this now, so chill out. She calmed down. When can I see her? At her graduation if you want to come. Of course I'll come. Can't I see her sooner? You both need time to get used to it. Take your time. How about we get there the day before? She smiled. That would be wonderful. Now, how about I take a picture of you so she can see what you look like? Okay. We found a spot outside for her to pose. When I started to leave, she rushed over, hugged me, and kissed my face and head. Not too demonstrative, is she? Asked Roland, laughing. I decided I liked him. That same afternoon, I flew back to prepare Sarah. I showed her a picture of Lydia. She's beautiful, Sarah said. She was very nervous but excited at the same time. For the first time since I'd known her, she hugged me. Thank you, Uncle Fred. Now we know where you get your beauty, said Sammy, snuggling tightly against Sarah. Do you know what my birth father looks like? Sarah asked timidly. The other three adults looked at me with widened eyes, waiting to see what I would say. I thought for a moment before I spoke. Let me tell you that you got your blonde hair and blue eyes from him. The three adults breathed a sigh of relief. We had only taken a week's vacation, so I had to go back to Alaska, but Joni stayed behind to help everyone prepare for the big day. I left for Alaska, promising to be back 2 days before graduation. The day before I was due back in Killeen, I got a call from a private detective. The most he'd been able to find out about Weber was that after leaving government service, he'd taken a job as a consultant to the government of a Middle Eastern country. Like several other American consultants, he disappeared shortly after arriving in country and has not been seen since. I met Lydia and Roland at the airport and drove them straight to Sarah's house. When we entered, she was standing in the middle of the living room. I let Lydia go first. They looked at each other for a long time. Then Lydia spoke. I brought you this, she said, pulling out a pacifier. It belongs to you, and I thought you might want it back.